Okay, so it's been a while since I've done one of these, and apologies for the lack of content in recent days. There's been a horrible virus going around, horrible chesty cough kind of chest infection virus. So trying to talk on camera was almost near on impossible. Now, my last video I did was, showing off the new additions to the memorabilia collection, and that took me quite some time to do a 7-minute video in one take. Um, yeah, it was a horrible attempt to get it done. Feeling a bit better today. A lot to discuss in sport. So obviously the Ashes has concluded. 2-all the series ended. Obviously the third test heavily weather disrupted. Obviously England with their baseball kind of tactics didn't their game management. Their patience wasn't there in the first two tests. If they played the last two tests like they played the first two tests, they win the series 4-0. So their game management undid them. Some of the decisions taken tactically undid them. And of course, the Bairstow stumping was hilarious because, the spirit of the game only applies when England are the ones on the receiving end rather than giving it out. But, Stuart Broad's obviously now retired as well with 604 test wickets. The second greatest fast bowler for wicket taken after Jimmy Anderson, although he's got a better average than Jimmy Anderson. Jimmy Anderson's turned 41, I think. This is Jimmy Anderson hasn't got much left in the tank either. So two greats are going to be retiring from the game within the next year. Obviously, Stuart Broad's gone. On the Australian side of things, I think they got lucky in the result of the series because of the third test being disrupted by the weather. I think the third test, had it gone the distance, would have been pivotal in one or the other team winning the series 3-2. Um, so there's that. Of course, there's also the debate about how rushed the series was within a very short time frame with the 100 format, which no one wants, by the way. But the ECB is continuing with a loss-making format. The weather's been dreadful. We haven't really had much of a summer. A lot of bad weather. We've got another storm today. I might try and catch some footage of that if it picks up a bit. We've got some thunderstorms floating around. Football news: the Saudi, money in the game, and all these players signing in Saudi Arabia for stupid money. And where's Mbappe going to end up? Where's Harry Kane going to end up? I really couldn't care less, honestly. There's a reason why I've done no content on all these players signing in Saudi Arabia, um, because I've completely lost my love for the game as it currently stands. Of course, I'll still do the history videos, and I'll still discuss, manager sackings, club takeovers, the Reading Football Club situation. I mean, they've had their second transfer embargo just lifted. So I'll still discuss topics such as that, but my actual love for the game is not where it was 10 years ago. I've completely fallen out of love with the club game to a point where I will still cover matches. I will still cover, transfers occasionally if I deem it actually worthy news. I'll still discuss, managerial sackings and stuff, but I don't have the same passion that I have for the game when I started the channel, for example. Been watching a lot of the NRLW. I've been watching the first 3 rounds to this point. The expansion has been really good. I think rugby league in Australia and New Zealand seems to be dealing with growing the game in a much better way than over here in Europe with the Super League. Yes, the Lee Leopards will be playing in the Challenge Cup final in those hideous jerseys. Oh, they're so ugly. They're going to be collectible in about 10, 15, 20 years' time. I was never really sold on the rebrand from the Lee Centurions to the Lee Leopards, but teams have renamed themselves constantly. I mean, if you look at my club histories, football clubs have gone through name changes repetitively over the years, but still being the same club. It's just that the jerseys are absolutely disgusting. So bad, so ugly, so cringe that I think in 10, 15, 20 years' time, they're going to be sought after collectibles. I also fear for the Lee Leopards they're going to do a Bradford Bulls where they're going to be a very, very good team for a very, very short period of time, overextend themselves financially and end up in a situation like Bradford rather than in a situation like, let's say, a Salford Red Devils who've managed to establish themselves now in the Super League. I fear that for the Lee Leopards, but time will tell. Yeah, no, the Football League starting. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of transport disruption, not just here in the UK, but around Europe. A lot of industrial action, weather affecting things with heavy rain in Northern Europe and this Storm Anthony, in Southern Europe, the heat wave and the disruption. Obviously, the Women's World Cup. I've watched one game, and it's literally to do with the fact it clashes with the rugby league. It clashes with work. which is a massive problem. It's been a fantastic tournament from all reports. I mean, I've been reading the match reports, looking at some of the highlights. I've caught a game in a bit. I mean, Portugal nearly knocked out the US in the group stages. So I've watched the game in a bit. I watched England's first game against Haiti, and I watched the last 10 minutes of Portugal USA. But it clashes with my work commitments, and this is a problem that I have being, in full-time employment and a YouTuber. And when a tournament is on the other side of the world, like the Women's FIFA World Cup, being able to watch any games is a problem. And then on a weekend, I've got the NRL and NRLW to watch because I really enjoy watching, those leagues. And then I've got a World Cup tournament, which is clashing actually with the Australian leagues because of stadium availability. I think I will watch the latter stages. If I might watch some games tomorrow, I might watch. I probably will watch the World Cup final. Even if England aren't in it, I'll still watch the World Cup final. Um, I will be watching the Challenge Cup final as well, both men's and women's. So there's a few live games I'm going to try and watch. And then, of course, the Rugby World Cup starts next month, and I'm going to do a preview of the Rugby World Cup. And I think I've already done a preview of the Rugby World Cup on the group stage. I think I have, but I've got to look at the Rugby World Cup. And I'll again work commitments. Some of the earlier, daytime kickoffs, I'm probably not going to be able to watch every game, which is frustrating. Um, but the Rugby World Cup coincides well. The Women's World Cup final and the Challenge Cup finals coincides with me living here for 3 years. So there you go. There's a nice little anniversary. I've lived in my apartment now for 3 years. On I think it's the 13th or the 14th. So it's not a nice coincidence there. I've been here for 3 years. But no, there are some. I might you know watch some of it, but it's August, and this is the time of year where I make less content anyway. It's the time of year when on the I just feel fatigued. While the weather isn't great outside and it's raining right now, and the rain's just got heavier because of Storm Anthony, the humidity is like 90%. It's still in the mid 20s degrees Celsius, which is in the high 80s, low 90s Fahrenheit. For those who live in North America and some other parts of the world do their temperatures in Fahrenheit. The weather's oppressive. There's a possibility of thunderstorms, so my internet connection may go at any time. So yeah, things are a bit naff. Um, but yeah, no. Looking at the league season, it snuck up on us. Of course, we can look back and say, well, the last season ended quite late, and that's in due in part with the World Cup in Qatar. There's been a very shortened off season. Um, there's been a lot of commotion, obviously, with the Saudi money and Ronaldo starting the complete avalanche of what I would describe players who are literally on their last legs when it comes to top level football, and some average players who've had decent careers because they've managed to have decent careers, but they're average and they're overpaid in the European leagues, going over to Saudi for what I can only describe as disgustingly ridiculous sums of money. Um, but yeah, yeah. Well, look, the things like the Netball World Cup and these other major sporting events. Firstly, they're not getting the coverage because of the Women's World Cup and then the Rugby World Cup upcoming. So that's where a lot of the international media, sports media, are looking at these other major sporting events. The Commonwealth Games is in a bit of a discussion because obviously the state of Victoria and Australia and Melbourne have pulled out. The Gold Coast might step in. The 2030 Commonwealth Games is also another doubt. Alberta's now withdrawing from wanting to host that. So the Commonwealth Games as a sporting event, its future's now in doubt. The Rugby League World Cup as a sporting event, its future's now in doubt. So the sports media is overlooking some of these other great sporting events, which I think do deserve potentially more coverage and more attention and more column inches in the newspapers and on websites than they're actually getting. But the UK and the England and the English netball programs have been fantastic for a very, very long time. This shouldn't surprise anyone. There's been a lot of investment. The quality's massively improved. You've got the Netball Super League, which has definitely had an impact. So we'll see what happens. The 2026 Commonwealths, we don't even know if the 2030 Commonwealths are going to have a host either because Alberta's just pulled out. So that's Calgary and that's Edmonton as hosts. So the next two Commonwealth Games, no one knows. Gold Coast has sort of basically said they will happily take on the responsibility. Whether that gets confirmed or not, we don't know. It's also like the Rugby League World Cup. where the next one will be hosted following the French withdrawal. Now we've obviously had the US pull out, now France pull out. I mean, this this is at a time when public spending's been hammered over the last 15 years. There's been a lot of economic uncertainty since the late 2000s, and hosting major sporting events are ruinously expensive, and a lot of the times don't actually turn a profit. People actually forget how expensive it is not only to prepare facilities and the bidding process and getting the various infrastructure in place for a major sporting event, that they don't actually realise that a lot of the time, like Olympics, all the way through to Commonwealth Games and World Cups, they are exceptionally expensive. So I think one of the last Olympics to actually turn a profit and actually be decent, I think, was 2012. 2012, I think, is the archetypal. If you're working on a reduced budget from when you won the Olympics to actually hosting it, and then using the facilities afterwards. The 2012 Olympics, while there was a lot of issues surrounding it because of the financial issues that came in 2007 to 2010, change of government spending changing, certain delays with contracts and infrastructure. The 2012 Olympics, actually, with a lot of the negative press that went beforehand, the aftermath has been fantastic. And some of those facilities, like the stadium and the Copper Box Arena and a lot of the other facilities that are still being used, making revenue, I think, and that legacy, that Olympic legacy we talk about, that's the blueprint for how you should host a major sporting event. It's the same with Commonwealths. Birmingham did fantastically. Glasgow did really, really well. Manchester is another one that, ironically, there obviously the Etihad was the Commonwealth Stadium in 2002. These are we get underrated for hosting sporting events. We really do. So. But the costs even there, they cost a lot of money to prepare for over a long period of time. I remember back in 2014, I was when I was a lot younger, before the channel even existed. I was doing a contract job up in Birmingham. Even then, they were doing a lot of infrastructure in the West Midlands, and they hadn't even won the rights. I think it was the year they were bidding to host it in 2014. They were already starting massive infrastructure developments in and around Birmingham in preparation for their bid. So before a bid is even put in, host cities or host countries would already have started infrastructure projects in order to put that proposal before the governing body of let's say the IOC or FIFA, UEFA, that kind of thing. Say, look, we've already got massive infrastructure investment. We're willing to double down on that. So I think that had an impact on the fact that Birmingham got their Commonwealth bid in place. I think Glasgow as well with their one. They had also heavily invested in infrastructure projects around the city of Glasgow and improvements with housing and various projects put in place that had been signed up years before they bid as part of the bidding process. But there's a lot of political capital. I mean, Tokyo. Part of the reason why Tokyo decided to bid for their disrupted Olympics was partly because the Japanese government had got behind the Rugby Federation's bid for the Rugby World Cup, which was a success, by the way. And there was already that infrastructure improvement being done to the stadiums in Japan, on top of the fact that they had already hosted a previous one with the 2002 co-hosting of the FIFA World Cup. So there was a lot of infrastructure in place, and the Japanese are very, very good at infrastructure projects and very modern infrastructure projects. But because COVID came along, it became a massive issue. And of course, Japan has a lot of natural disasters like earthquakes, typhoons, and volcanic activity. So they have to be very ingenious with their infrastructure in order to work around, the environment that Japan sits in. But I mean, the facilities at the Olympics were fantastic. The public opinion changed when COVID became a problem, and it started to lose a lot of money. And it partly was the reason why Shinzo Abe stood down as Japanese prime minister at the time. It had a lot of political damage for the governing the government of Japan, which I don't know when the next Japanese election is, but that will be remembered by voters. And it was one of the few times the Japanese public actually went out in force and protested. Japanese don't protest a lot. They don't protest. They don't riot. They're very, very I wouldn't say humble, but they're very, very reserved in their public opinions on things. The Japanese public went nuts by their standards. By our standards, that's just like a quiet, five idiots on a roundabout with some placards saying the world's going to end. But by Japanese standards, it was big public shift against it. Now we are starting to see regional and national governments obviously struggling financially. COVID's had an impact, and now we're seeing Commonwealth Games and the Rugby League World Cup, for example, becoming hot political potatoes, and we've got to find a host for these events. Now, where the Commonwealth Games ends up, I don't know. What country in the Commonwealth has the spare finance or the infrastructure already in place in a very short period of time? We've only got 3 years uh, to say, look, we've already got the infrastructure in place, or the majority of it in place, be it transport, housing, stadium, hotel space, accommodation, whatever, to be willing to host a major international event, Rugby League World Cup. Okay, you may need less infrastructure for that, but you're still going to have stadiums that meet international requirements for pitch size and in goal areas, which have to be all seater stadiums. You're going to have hotel space for journalists and the players, and a potential amount of overseas fans. It's something that's yeah. But Australia obviously pulled out of the Rugby League World Cup in 2021 when they were meant to go overseas and play. Um, the issue is the Victorian state government. This is not the federal government in Canberra. This is the state government in Melbourne, in the state of Victoria. The Queensland government seems to have a lot of political sway right now on regional policy. They've stepped up and saved a lot of sporting events like the AFL, like the NRL during the COVID disrupted seasons, which is why I think Gold Coast have sort of gone, hello. And Gold Coast is one of the fastest growing cities, not only in the Southern Hemisphere in Australia, but in the world. So there's a lot of infrastructure projects already going on the Gold Coast. They have great public transport infrastructure. There's a lot of hotel space, a lot of Airbnbs. It has the infrastructure in place. A lot of athletes already do their warm weather training there. So, and the state government in Victoria, and I have followed this, and I could do more videos on the NRL and the AFL and how over the last couple of years the state government in Brisbane, the Queensland government, has basically held professional sport by the balls. And whereas the state government in Victoria is a mess. There's a lot going on politically in Australia. It's a mess. That the federal government's changed since the Commonwealth Games was announced to be there. It was a Liberal national coalition. Now it's the Labor parties. There's a change in national policy. A lot of the Liberal state governments have fallen and either gone to coalitions or no overall control. So there's been a political shift in Australia anyway, which then has a bearing on spending. Now, the state government in Victoria is not overly popular anyway, but Melbourne as a city and Victoria as a state is got a proud history of hosting major sporting events and doing it very, very well. And I think I don't know how the people of Melbourne and the state of Victoria, like places like Geelong and Ballarat, feel in regards to them pulling out. I think it reflects badly on a sports mad country. Sport is ingrained in Australian culture, absolutely ingrained. Um, like so, it's a difficult one. There's a lot of eyebrows being raised considering they put a lot of money into hosting the Women's FIFA World Cup. Keeping the AFL and NRL competitions going during COVID, so they could actually have seasons played, even without fans in attendance, and moving teams around. They really back their athletes. But then the last Commonwealth Games in Australia didn't go very well in regards. I think it on Gold Coast. It didn't go down very well. There was some organisational issues. There were some money problems. There were some organisational problems, and they didn't go as well as hoped. I think back in the day, a couple of years ago. This is before COVID, so there was a lot of negative press about the last Commonwealth Games in Australia. The fact that Gold Coast has stepped in and said, look, we'll host it again. They've already got the infrastructure in place, and I think they would have learned the lesson significantly from the last Commonwealths they hosted. But there was a lot of negativity around that 4 or 5 years ago. So, yeah, but with the Canadians saying that we don't want to host the 2030 Commonwealths, public spending, there's a lot of issues with sports teams and leagues around the Western world right now with finance and individual teams having stadium issues or money issues or ownership problems, leagues having structural issues, and it's becoming more and more political. When we say, oh, the politics has gone very neoliberal left, well, whatever, or politically correct, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think politics has become very, very polarized, and sport is now becoming used, be it professional or Olympic, maybe amateur sport, is now being used as political football across the world. Is troubling. Like we've seen it with the Arizona Coyotes with their arena issues in the city of Tempe, which is part of the Phoenix metropolitan area in Arizona, and that became political. We've seen it in Calgary with the Flames and the Saddle Dome and replacing their arena. We started to see it, I think, in Florida a little bit with the Panthers. Now, if the Florida Panthers remain playoff contending team and continue to push for Stanley Cup finals like they did last season, their arena agreement with Sunrise, Florida, with their BB&T arena in the middle of the Everglades, basically, it's on the edge of the Everglades, that becomes less of a political issue because the team started to become successful. Yes, Montreal 70, was it 76? Nearly, they didn't complete where the Gilles Villeneuve circuit is in the Olympic Park. And they did have the Calgary Games, Winter Olympics in '88 is obviously made famous by cool runnings and things like that. But the Olympics in Montreal, the Summer Olympics, was a disaster. There was a lot of labour unrest with the workers building the facilities, and this is at the height of the Quebec independence movement. There was a lot of political capital put behind the independence parties and the nationalist movement of Quebec in the federal parliament at the time. They were trying to use that. Workers weren't getting paid properly. There were a lot of strikes. There was a lot of corruption allegations. A lot of the facilities were underused following the Olympics. A lot of facilities nearly weren't ready for the Olympics. But their Winter Olympics in Calgary and Vancouver have gone off fantastically, and have had the highest ratings on Canadian TV of all time, and on I think international TV of all time for up the top 10. Whereas that Summer Olympics in Montreal was an absolute disaster. But then again, with the Women's FIFA World Cup in Canada, a couple of World Cups back, that wasn't well received at the time. I think it was that in 2015 or 2013? Think it was. I think it was 2015, the Canadian Women's World Cup. That wasn't well received either. Um, for the quality of pitches and facilities. There's been issues with sport in Canada of a national sense. I mean, the Canadian women's team obviously failed to get out the group stage in this World Cup. There are issues with their federation about pay, sponsorship deals, and bonuses and insurance, and how they've been protesting about that. Considering that their women's program in both rugby and football is fantastic, and they're doing really, really well, they've had issues with their federations over funding. Then you've got the Hockey Canada with their, World Junior team and the allegations of inappropriate conduct by players and coaches over many, many years, especially around the 2018 World Juniors and paying off people. There are issues with Canadian sport. It is becoming political. There's a lot of issues there. A lot of allegations about a lot of problems within the administration side and how they deal with complaints, funding, and sponsorships. Like Hockey Canada's board, for example, has pretty much lost all its sponsors, and they've pretty much all resigned over the last couple of years because of the 2018 World Juniors scandal, which comes on the back of the Chicago Blackhawks scandal of a similar nature. So, sports admin in Canada is a mess. Um, Players, both men and women in various sports and athletes, aren't very happy. Um, I wouldn't say all the female athletes seem very confident. I think the Canadian ones have a fair point with contracts that have been signed, and especially the men. The men have backed them up. Well, they seem they're collegiate educated. These are not your average, you know, European working class, didn't finish secondary education football players. The Canadian women are very well educated in the sense that they know the legalities of the contracts they signed, which Canadian soccer have basically reneged on. I wouldn't say they're the one confident. I think they're going about it the right way. That they feel much like the NRL and NRLW players in Australia with their CBA negotiations. That hang on a second, we've been taken for a bit of a ride here. Um, Things aren't working out. We're not as dumb as the media, portrays. And I think the media, because they've signed contract, because the big media companies have signed massive contracts to say that we're going to host every international tournament, and they're pumping money in, they're going to spin it in a negative way so the players are greedy. Um, I think there's got to be more of a independent. This is why I don't like the mainstream sports media, because there is a massive bias from these big corporations, these big networks, trying to paint the individual players or playing groups as greedy and millionaires whining about missing out on a few dollars of insurance here or a bonus there, when actually it's people in the governance side are taking massive bonuses. You've got these TV companies making a lot of money through the advertising revenue, and the players, you know, sometimes careers can be ridiculously short. I look at the amount of players who various contact sports, team sports, who've retired young, still in their mid to late 20s. You could still have 5, 10 years worth of career. Who've retired for health reasons, and I can just go Sydney Roosters, Boyd Cordner and Jake Friend, concussions, and they still had 5+ years worth of career if they'd stayed healthy ahead of them. Pat Lambie in rugby union, he's the same age as me, but he retired. Was it 5, 6 years ago? I did a video on it back in 28. He retired. Fantastic. He missed out on the World Cup win because he retired because of concussion. Um, I would have thought he would have been one of the starting. He would have been in the race, been one of the 3 fullbacks taken on that 2019 World Cup squad. But I think the US women's soccer team or football team. I think there are certain players within that core leadership group, like Megan Rapinoe, um, who, while the message is right, it's the person delivering the message that doesn't help their cause. Um, if that makes sense. I don't think she's the right messenger for the message or how, but this is an issue that it doesn't matter which player they're going to put up. The media or the mainstream media are going to paint this picture, and then social media is going to paint this picture of this is crazy pink-haired lesbian militant lefty blah. I think what they're trying to get at is they're more successful than the men internationally. They've won more tournaments. They deserve their tournament bonus. They deserve their insurance. And they do. But the problem is the professional game in the US doesn't exist. That's why all the good players are playing in Europe in the professional European leagues and getting paid a professional wage. Let that sink in. Because for whatever reason, women's professional sport in the US and to a certain extent Canada fails at club level. But their international teams, like in rugby union and ice hockey and women's football, are absolutely fantastic. Their club game, for whatever reason, outside of the internationals, fans don't care. They cherry pick. They're fair weather fans. In Europe, I think we're starting to support the women's versions of men's team sports rather well. There's still those idiots on social media, which I get bored of. But I've spent all morning watching NRLW games. The way they play the game, um, the play the ball's quicker, the tackle area and the ruck area is cleaner. They don't have the 6 again rule because they don't require it. Because the areas in the men's NRL game where they're slowing down the play the ball with the wrestle, the women's game doesn't have that. And it's like women's rugby union. It's like going back 25 years, and rugby union, I think, was at its peak before all the issues with the scrum, the amount of high tackles, more players getting actually concussed, and you can be visibly seen. The way the women's players approach football, rugby union, rugby league, is actually ultimately refreshing. But a lot of the fans have got so used to watching the men's game evolve into this hyper overpaid, every player is generic with a handful of superstars, whereas before you could have an average team full of superstars because the league was so good that I can remember you know some of the club sides like Bayer Leverkusen. Yeah, they won two trophies. I think that Bayer Leverkusen won two trophies, one of them in my lifetime. They had a stacked team when they got to that Champions League final. Bayer Leverkusen obviously was the nickname. They had a stacked team, so let that sink in. But no, I do think North America, they will follow their national teams, and then at club level it falls apart. The leagues make no money, whereas in Europe they're actually starting to make money. Some teams are actually making money now. They're breaking even at a push. Obviously, with the finances and the economic issues we faced since the mid to late 2000s, and public spending, okay, not great. But I think some of the issues that we have is that forced upon us rather than it's just a natural evolution of, hey, girls and women want to play and want to watch. And I've actually noticed the viewership figures from women on the channel, who identify as women, obviously, because we've got to cover that. About 15% of my viewers are women, um, in the last month, 2 months. All time, I think it's a bit lower, but the viewership figures from female viewers are going up. So women are starting to get more and more interested in watching sport. Now, the studies have shown, and I keep harking back to this, and I will get to the questions on the big nations falling out the World Cup, Women's World Cup, and things like that. Studies have shown that participation in sports do drop off when you leave education, generally. Now, in men, we may stop playing sport for a while, like I did, and then play again, and then for whatever reason stop again. But we play in adulthood post education. I did that for a bit. I had some injuries, don't play anymore. But then I got back into, but then I stopped, and I started again, then I stopped again for various reasons. But I still was involved in a sporting activity post education twice. I played rugby for a bit. I played five-a-side league for a little bit. Now, with my current job, it's a very physical job. I don't really have the energy. However, some of my work colleagues do still play non-league football. So, and some of the other work colleagues play grassroots amateur level rugby. So there are some people I work with who are still actively involved in sport in their late 30s, 20s to 30s, 40s that I work with. On the women's side of things, the drop off is still there after education, but it's sharper. Less women post the ages of 16 to 20. I'm going to say, let's say 25, because some university courses go on until your late 20s, right? Post education, that includes school to university, the drop off is ridiculous. And the percentages that decide to continue to play are lower in women than men. Now, that trend is starting to be reversed. However, it's more pronounced in poor inner city areas. It's more pronounced in immigrant communities or religious communities. Um, and it's more pronounced in lower income families, in women than in men. Circling back, participation rates at younger ages outside of education, so still in the school years, but when you're not actually in an educational setting, have skyrocketed, right? With the little leagues, the AAA, Pee Wee football, Pee Wee baseball, they've skyrocketed. So participation levels of youth outside of education, so when it's not part of the curriculum, when it's actually families taking their kids down to the local club to play football, rugby, cricket, whatever it may be, have gone up. But post education drops off. So there's some studies that put a lot of stats, but we are starting to see participation levels in women post education starting to increase again because they now have role models. With England women winning the Euros, they start having role models. With Australia and New Zealand hosting a World Cup, role models. With the Australian women winning the World Cup Rugby League, role models, right? They're seeing it now with the expansion of the NRLW, role models, the expansion of the AFLW, role models. They're starting to see that this is a potential career path where I can earn money and get paid to do it. Whereas before I had to be amateur or have one or two other jobs to support playing. it's starting to become a reality now. The difference is, that's Australia, New Zealand, Europe, US, and Canada. You've got to go through the collegiate system, get into ridiculous amounts of debt, and you're still not guaranteed to get the money. So that's where you're seeing a difference. My thoughts on some of the big nations like Brazil and Germany and Canada going out. This just shows how much the sport has progressed in recent years. From where we were when the Canadians hosted the tournament, it's progressed massively. I will admit that massively progressed from where we were 8 years ago. Because the European leagues are starting to turn professional. They're actually getting paid to play rather than having to be part-time amateurs or semi-pros. So the fitness levels have improved, the scouting's improved, the coaching's improved, more investment from the big European clubs into their women's programs. Germany, though, I think are going through this transition phase. I think the US are also going to go through this transition phase. They've been terrible at this World Cup. Portugal, if they hadn't hit that post, if that Portuguese shot goes in, USA have already gone as well. We are starting to see a shift in the power balance. I think the US, because their domestic game is a mess, it will eventually start having an impact. The Germany side of things, the men's team's already going through this. The women's team's starting to go through this. And the Euros final last year highlighted the issues the Germans had. Now, they got to that final. Fair play to them. It was a very competitive women's Euros. There were some very, very good results, some good performances. But England completely outplayed them in that Euros final. Completely. I mean, the scoreline was much closer than it should have been. They could physically the fitness, the teamwork, the structures, the talent coming through. Brazil is like an enigma in both the men and women's game. They have all this skill and talent and ability, but you can put Brazil could name like 10 international sides with the amount of players that are registered to play. But we could say that the best Brazil side was the 1970 side. It was a culmination of 2 out of 3 previous World Cups. They kept that continuation of this is samba football. 1970 is the pinnacle for Brazil. It's been downhill ever since, even though they've won further tournaments since then. You can have all the talent, but you've got to glue it together in some way. And there's a lot of this individualistic nature to it. And then they're too reliant on a handful of the structures. Brazil's an enigma. It's like the All Blacks before they went on their back-to-back World Cups. From 1991 until 2011, the All Blacks, best team in the world, can't win the World Cup. So there's that enigma. So there is that. On top of that, there's been a lot of issues with financing and funding in Brazilian sport. Again, the aftermath of the last the Brazil World Cup and the Rio Olympics, a lot of financial impropriety, a lot of issues, and some of their key core players, aging quite a bit. Marta, for example, too reliant on an aging player base when these other nations have really invested in their youth, really basically encouraged a lot of their players to go to the big European leagues to be more professional, fitter, healthier, better training. Brazil, like the men's team, heavily reliant on a handful like Neymar, for example, in the men's game. Too reliant on one player. It's like Argentina with Messi. Yes, they finally get there, but other players had to also shoulder some of the responsibility. No, the Saudi league's like the Chinese Super League. The Chinese had the funds. Seriously, the Chinese had the bottomless pit of money when the Chinese Super League was a thing. Now, under Xiao Jinping, the central government of China has changed a lot of their, basically forcing a lot of Chinese. They're basically Chinese, very state-controlled government. They relaxed and became more of a free market economy where a percentage of funds had to go to the Communist Party in tax. Now they're really reining in the money. China's got a lot of debt now. The Saudis, it's going to be like the Chinese Super League all over again because it is actually the public investment fund funding for the big clubs now, having partial stakes. So it's going to be like the Chinese Super League, a lot of government money via a holding company. It will end up like the Chinese Super League. I'm just going to might drop it there. Look, to me, the way the sport is going, as I said at the beginning of the live stream, I'm falling out of love with the club game. I'm falling out of love with the international game on the men's side of things. I still believe the pinnacle of the game was in the 2000s. Some of the transfer fees that have been thrown around now, or potential transfer fees for players, are ridiculous and are overinflated completely. What's going to happen with Mbappe? I mean, Christ, who can afford that under financial fair play as it currently stands, and who's going to ultimately sign him? Because the new spending rules come in, and that's just going to be a ridiculous. How they're going to work around that contract is going to be ridiculous. I don't think US and Canadian players will be playing in Europe by next World Cup. Well, Canada's part of the Commonwealth, and they have different visa entry requirements to the US. And the US does have a very generous visa requirement to enter UK, although the EU is going to change their visa requirements from next year for US and Canadians and us entering. So it's going to be interesting. It is going to be interesting. I do think international netball has progressed a lot. Yeah, well, the Aussies and us have put a lot of money into our domestic leagues, and we do attract talent from around the world. In regards to the US and Canadian players, a lot of them ending up in the European leagues. Yeah, obviously, US and Canadians look at their population bases. There's a lot of immigrant communities that are like Greek, Italian, Croatian, French, German, Irish. They're going to obviously have links with family in Europe as well, and with that European connection. A lot of them are doing it through the education system as well. And also there's professionalism. So there's a lot of reasons why North American players would migrate to Europe. But they could also end up in Australia and New Zealand because they're trying the same thing with their women's leagues as well on a slightly lesser scale. So we'll see what happens. Hockey updates. It's still the off season. There's still some trades to take place. I mean, the Eric Carlson enigma is going to be the one that I think people are going to talk about until the end of pre-season. There's still, I think, 10 teams over the cap. There's been some LTIR moves already, like Matt Murray, for example, being placed on long-term injured reserve. However, the salary cap is projected to skyrocket in 12 months' time. But the Eric Carlson potential trade, I mean, I remember when he got traded to the Sharks from the Senators. It's going to be interesting. There's going to have to be, I think, a multi-team set of trades. We'll see what happens. When will Russia return to international sports? When Putin's no longer in power, I would have thought. But again, that's a political thing. That's political pressure being put upon international sporting governing bodies, all the way from FIFA, the IOC, IIHF, all the way down to some of the lesser international sports. That is political pressure being put upon by certain countries. On a fan level, it is disappointing not being able to see like Ovechkin, for example, at the World Championships earlier this summer. For example, it is disappointing not seeing some of the up and coming Russian football players being able to see them potentially qualified for World Cups and Euros. It is a bit disappointing because they've got some great talented athletes. However, a lot of the top athletes have links to the Kremlin, so they can get decent contracts. Will the NRL player strike? Well, it's becoming a bit more of a fluid situation in the last couple of days. They covered the logos last weekend. This weekend, they've uncovered the NRL logo. They're still sort of not communicating with the press. There's still that interview boycott. So we're just seeing. So I saw Craig Bellamy's interview with Channel 9 basically after their defeat at Penrith. Normally he'll have one of the Christian Welsh or a select player in the leadership group to be alongside him. He took the interview alone. So that press interview boycott is still continuing. Will we see like the replacements with with Reeves and Hackham, which is a decent film. It's not the best sports film, but it's a decent film. But it actually did happen. Obviously, the NRL wants to take games to the US. They've confirmed that they are going to Vegas next year. 3 teams are basically nearly confirmed on the details. One team has fully come out and said, "Yep, we're going." This is where the players hold the cards. They have to really use the threat of strike action either to delay finals, because the NRL has said the women's grand final and the men's grand final is on the 1st of October at Accor Stadium. They confirmed the date. The players now, the power is in their hands. This is where they can go, right, okay, we're going to strike. Because, let's be honest, the NRLW, I think, has been fantastic so far. On the field, performance has been fantastic. Only one winless team out of 10. Everyone can beat everyone. Parramatta's just having a disastrous season, but that's Parramatta. So if you're a Parramatta fan, you're used to having dreadful seasons and not being successful for a very, very long time until the men's team have got better. But I'll leave that there. In regards to the US games, further expansion, the finals, growing the women's game, the players really can bugger the NRL a little bit. Now, the fact that it's taken 21 and a half months to get to this point, nearly 2 years of negotiation to get to this standoff, is the fault of both sides. It really is. I think we could see a strike. I'm still surprised Peter V'landys hasn't come in front of the media. I don't think he's still back in the country yet. Then there seems to be a vacuum. I mean, Clint Newton, whether Clint Newton is the right guy to be in charge of the RLPA or not, we can debate that. But even on the podcast, it's gone quiet now. That initial week, 2 weeks, even the podcasts were, and radio stations like, let's get Clint Newton on. Let's have a bit, and let's get some of the players on. Because podcasts aren't covered by the media boycott. The RLPA have been very, very cheeky in that regard, but the mainstream media have been biased for the most part against the play. Now, it's an interesting one because the NRL is different to the US leagues in a sense where you have a commission. The team owners have a bit less power than in the US and Canadian leagues when it comes to lockouts and boycotts and strikes and negotiations. The NRL head office is a bit more separate. So the governance is slightly different. I think they need to hold that card close. I think they knew it. They can still ultimately do it. I remember I remember being a kid and the NHL players striking and delaying the start of the playoffs. I think was it 93 and 94, the year before their first lockout. They went on strike and delayed the start of the playoffs. So they could do that. They could really disrupt the scheduling for the final series for the top 8. They could disrupt the end of season test matches. So the Tongans are coming over to the UK for a 3-match tour. They could disrupt that. So I think they need to keep that trump card, that joker in the pack there. But I'm still surprised there's been a lack of statements from the NRL in regards to coming back around the table. I think they will renegotiate. However, I can see heads rolling in both organisations in various departments. Now, whether the NRL decide to move on from Abdo, like they did with Greenberg, whether V'landys decides to really bloody his axe again, where he takes control again. Clint Newton, is he the guy to lead the RLPA forward? I can see there's already been a lack of good faith in the negotiations for the best part of 2 years, but There we go. Tom Brady investing in Birmingham City. This is a club that's had bad ownership for a long time. The situation at St Andrews with the stadium being in a poor state of repair and needing refurbishment or rebuilding completely sums up where Birmingham City are at. Hopefully, this is a long-term investment that is sustainable, and he's there for the long haul, and he's not just there for the Instagram likes and the fact that he's this big famous retired athlete from overseas. Hopefully he's there for the long haul to invest and continue investing and provide some stability and ownership, which the club has lacked for a long time. But he's only got a minority stake, so he's only pumping some investment in. He's only got a minority stake, not a massive majority stake, so he may over time become the majority stakeholder. We shall have to see. Rugby World Cup wants to expand into Russia. Russia have played in the Rugby World Cup before and not done a lot. They don't really, honestly. They don't need Russia. They just need to make sure that I think Rugby League World Cup or Rugby League needs to expand a bit more than Rugby Union. Rugby Union's got a lot of internal issues that they need to sort out, especially with finance. And Russia is not the most financially stable country in the world. Even before the Ukraine war, it's had issues with the value of the ruble in the past and the economy. Uh, I wouldn't say the ROPA is completely united. I think that is again something that is being put out there by some who are pro player. Um, I believe there is some truth in the fact that not all players are fully agreed with the current stance. Some players already want to strike. For example, other players want to get a deal done and renegotiate without striking. Um, but I think a lot of the players, there's a big connection with the US. There's a big Pacific Island nation community in the US. There's a lot of Australians and Kiwis already in the US anyway. I can see the players being on board to going there. The fact that the NRL was been muting this idea for a long time anyway. I look if that's not it's not been brought up in the CBA negotiations as an area of concern. I think the players want to go to the US, yes, because it means they get more exposure, more sponsorship deals. They're going to get more bonuses. Um, I think the NRL is aware that if they don't get the players on board, they can't sell the product. So they've got to obviously give them some incentive. And I think going to the US, that brings more corporate money into the game. It brings more sponsorships into the game, a wider TV audience that gets into the game. Um, the issues with the RLPA and the NRL and the CBA, I mean, 100+ issues or something. Neither side's going to get all those issues resolved. Go with the big ones. And a lot of the big ones, ironically, the RLP are happy with the increase in salary cap. They're happy with the increase in the minimum salary, length of contract, that kind of thing. There are some other issues though that have been overlooked where for 20 odd years, the RLPA have basically overlooked a lot of issues. The NRL have allowed a lot of issues to be overlooked. So, yeah, it's a bit of a mess. It goes on for if it goes on for 7 more years, Russian athletes changing nations. Um, that's happened a lot in the past anyway. It happened during the Soviet Union, US Cold War era, where defectors would go over and suddenly get US or Canadian passports in ice hockey, or they would swap allegiance. It's not a new thing. Tennis, a lot of Russian and Belarusian players were already based in places like Florida anyway and California, um, where they train and where their coaches are based, or in Western Europe, like on the French Riviera. Um, yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird one. The issues at hand in regards to that, it's a bit of a mess. Great Britain Speedway in this country's been declining for some time. That's my view on that. a lot of speed. There was used to be a couple of speedway tracks near me. They're gone, long gone. And motocross as well is a bit up and down, but some of the motocross tracks near me are long gone as well. Safety issues and investment. Russia was a joke. Yeah, let's not go off topic. Enough of the sports topics are already political. Um, and Twitter isn't really called Twitter anymore. It's now called X, apparently. But Elon Musk is a Bond villain, and I no longer am on Twitter or X or whatever the bloody thing's called now, because that is a complete and utter mess. Because that's what happens when you sack all the human staff and replace them with robotic AI. That is flawed. Um, and I just hadn't. I'm getting bored of Facebook. I might actually just get rid of my personal Facebook altogether and just have a channel Facebook at this point. Because the amount of crap. I mean, I'm going to go on there quickly now. Um, the it's becoming more of a toxic environment, and I feel for athletes. I really do. I mean, I've got a couple of the NRLW players I follow on Instagram. I do. Um, I have I have sympathy. Let's just say that I have sympathy for athletes when they have to go on their socials and deal with some of the crap they have to deal with. Um, it gets a bit much. I've got to do a video on the relationship between sport and social media and how it has become more and more toxic as time has progressed. Um, there is no doubt on that. There is no doubt that as time has gone on, that um, the, the the relationship has become so toxic now, um, and so detrimental that you know um, it is having an impact on athlete performance. Um, I think Mbappe is going to leave PSG. I think the relationship at PSG with a lot of its players is broken down. I think the Messi situation has started it, and the Mbappe situation is a continuation of that. I don't see Neymar staying there much longer. And PSG's board have already come out and said we need to reduce our expenditure. We need to have more homegrown talent through our academy system. We need to reduce our reliance on the transfer market. They've already stated that already. Um, oh God, there are thunderstorms floating around. We are going to have some fun with this storm, Anthony. Um, in regards to Harry Kane, there's been a lot of discussions with Bayern Munich. Um, so again, but Joe Lewis and the ownership, I mean, he's been indicted, I think, or investigating the US for insider trading. So Tottenham's ownership have some problems. So Tottenham have had issues off the field that haven't been overly reported. But Joe Lewis, who owns the company that Levy, shareholder and he's the chairman, he's been investigated, for insider trading on the stock exchange. So there's things going on with Spurs. Will Kane be leaving? We've had this discussion now with Harry Kane since 2019, 2018. We'll see how Spurs do under Postecoglou. If they get off to a poor start this season in the first month, the transfer window shuts on September 1st. The Saudi window, which is the big bugbear with the European clubs, shuts, I think, 21st September. We'll see what happens. Mbappe, he said he doesn't want to go to Saudi Arabia. He wants to stay in Europe. So what club can justify spending his wages on a transfer fee? Could he force a Bosman ruling? That would be interesting. Imagine Mbappe going for a Bosman ruling to get out of his PSG contract. But again, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of half truths being reported, and this is where I get bored of the mainstream sports media. I really am. But the sports media, like the Athletic, is reducing its staffing levels. Is laying off a lot of staff. Do they though? I mean, Spurs have issues off the field with their owner being investigated for insider trading, which carries a hefty prison sentence. It's a federal crime in the US. I think it's a federal crime here, or a pretty severe crime here. Spurs have issues. Um, how many managers have they had now? That lack of success, the fact they still haven't got a title sponsor for the stadium. Just let that sink in. Spurs has more to lose if Kane leaves on a free compared to Mbappe. Reputational damage. Um, you know, PSG have spent a lot of money to only basically win the French league a lot, and the French Cup a lot, and to win how many Champions Leagues? Like, and even then, they nearly lost the French league to RC Lens. Went down to the final days of the season. So really, they had all they busted their gut to get Messi there, spent big money on his wages, and he leaves before the end of his contract. Mbappe wants to leave before the end of his contract. Neymar reportedly wants to leave before the end of his contract. So um, it's a thing. Local football club Hertford Town are giving my disability team free season tickets. And if I bring an adult, they go on half price. Oh, they're see that's that. You see, this is where I think a lot of the high profile, big clubs um, are losing touch with their community base. Uh, Clubs at the lower levels do more, I think, for that community outreach for those disadvantaged fans. Um, I think that's a fantastic initiative. Um, I think, unfortunately, that doesn't really, sell newspapers or website clicks or website subscriptions or advertising revenue. Because the way that the mainstream sports media works, and even to a certain extent the social media works, unfortunately, that kind of you know gesture by a lower league or non-league club doesn't generate the same media internet traffic or television ratings as speculation about Harry Kane or Mbappe or Neymar or Man City, their financial scandal. Um, oh, look, Spurs. I mean, look, they've obviously, you know, Spurs. They have got a passionate fan base. Historically, successful club in spells. They've won a lot of silverware historically. They have not won silverware more recently. They have underachieved for the history the club has, and the money spent. The problem is it's Daniel Levy and it's Joe Lewis. They are pure businessmen, plain and simple. And I don't think they're particularly um, compassionate people either. They just see money and money and money, um, and money and money and profit margins and money and more profit margin and more profit margin and money and money because that's top. Um, they much like Man United, it's money and money and they have invested heavily in the club, the stadium rebuilds, but there has to be a line between profits over people, and unfortunately, they've gone more for the profit over people, and they continue. At some point, fans have just got to start boycotting. They already want Levy to go. They already want Joe Lewis to go. A proportion of their fan base, but then what happens then? It's weird seeing so many successful club going downhill. Um, it's the way that the economics of the sport. I mean, as I said, when I did my last video and I got out the sports memorabilia, like the old programs, the old, Football League review, you can see, even in the space of a few years, how the advertising model changed and where the growing commercialization of the sport, even in the 60s, was there. So you see it. And then by the 80s, the big tobacco companies are the ones driving the sponsorship money, like betting companies today, and like the alcohol companies in the 90s and the 2000s. I mean, if my mum has my '95 Blackburn shirt, but I've got my, I think it was 2006, 2007 season shirt. I can chart the change in sports sponsorship from the 60s to now, with a handful of items of my sports memorabilia collection. And so in the 60s, you notice that York City poster on the inside of even the late 60s, early 70s Football League Review. Okay, that was a plane going overhead that's just got hit by lightning. Funky, so the thunderstorm's here. But going back to this Football League Review series of weekly periodical magazines, when you actually read inside, in the 1966 ones, the ones from 1969, 1970, the adverts change, and 90% of the ads later on are tobacco companies, and they get first page tobacco company, last page, the back cover tobacco company. You fast forward from the late 60s, early 70s to the early 80s, tobacco company is producing, where is it? Down there, the football annual with all the stats and all the figures and all the history of the football clubs. Rothmans, I think that was British American Tobacco. You see that. So we've gone from a building firm in, let's say, or a butler, like a holiday camp, your average family-owned business that just paid a little bit of money, regional business like Wilkinson Saw, which is in Birmingham, which is a heavy industry. Reliant Cars had your general background noise to big multinational corporation, which is a tobacco firm, Wilkinson Sword, which is now actually a big multinational part of a big. By the 90s, the big alcohol firms like Carling sponsored the Premier League, McEwen's Lager and Carlsberg, Blackburn and Liverpool, for example. The big electrical firms like JVC, famously with Arsenal. By the early 2000s, we get the mobile phone companies. So Everton, I believe, had Phones for You, I think, was a sponsor for them, or One to One. It was an early mobile phone network, or O2 with Arsenal and the England Rugby, or BT Cellnet back in the day. And then we get to the betting firms. So my Bet24 sponsored Blackburn shirts over there. And you can chart the change in the major sponsors. So where the bulk of the money's come from late 60s, early 70s, we start with the tobacco companies. Late 70s, early 80s, the driving forces, some electrical and car companies, big engineering firms come in. Then the alcohol comes in. Then the betting companies come in. There's phases where they're the driving force. And there are other sponsors as well, like, you've got travel companies, still got those car companies floating in the background. You might have, engineering firms, banking firms. But the driving forces of the vices, tobacco, alcohol, gambling, the legalized vices, as I call them, alcohol, tobacco, gambling. And we then have the debate, we've got to ban the adverts of tobacco. We've got to try and reduce the amount of adverts for alcohol. And now sports have got to go, well, especially when back in the day it was gate-driven leagues in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s, very heavily gate-driven. Well, we've got to make our revenue from somewhere, because otherwise we're not going to make any money. And in those various decades, there were recessions, there were economic downturns. The companies that made money were tobacco, alcohol, and gambling firms. Every time there's an economic recession, it's the three vices that seem to make money. So right now, it's the disposable vape companies. Sorry, still tobacco. Alcohol. The alcohol firms are still actually making some money, despite COVID, and gambling. They're still making money. A lot of people are now sat at home on more flexible contracts. So automatically, they're the businesses historically that have weathered economic downturns. There you go. And you can chart that over time. Now, I wish I had, even with my Bracknell Bees jerseys, which cover about a decade's worth of play, you can chart the change in title sponsors. And you can see that there's some more, international firms get in there at various points, like Subway, come in and out. But there's also those more family-orientated regional or local firms which come in and out. it's interesting how at the various levels of competition where professional and semi-pro teams go to get their sponsorship money from, especially in gate-driven leagues. It's very, very interesting. Um, so there's that, but then you look at these clubs that do have a lot of money behind them, like your PSGs, which are going, oh, we've got to cut our spending because the rest of the league has cut their spending, so it's and we're going to be under financial fair play obligate. Oh dear. Um, Whereas clubs like West Ham, which have just had won a major trophy, are now trying to sell their squad off. Matt Sevilla, who you know have a great record, it just shows how distorted that is. And clubs struggling to find sponsors is just a mess. Surprised that England have a good netball team. I'm not because of the funding. We've got a very very good netball structure. Um, will the NRL expand to 20 teams and have conferences? Oh God. Let's get to 18 teams first. They've been at 20 teams before and didn't have conferences. So um, right now, I think their next goal was to get that 18th men's team in NRLW. They're at 10. I think they want to, at some point, have a women's team for every men's team. I think that's the ultimate goal. Will a conference system? No. Look, the AFL doesn't have a conference system, and they've got more teams than the NRL. Both the NRL and AFL are looking at potential further expansion. Um, I, I don't think the conference system will fully work because there's not enough population in the western half of Australia to do it. And then travel distances. What would you do? Put Melbourne in a Western Conference? Or, for example, in the AFL, the Queensland and New South Wales teams underneath. I mean, travel distances would be a nightmare. No. Yeah, I don't like that. I think the way it's structured now, because most in the NRL, they're all on the East Coast. They're all basically in the same time zone. Unless they were to have teams in Adelaide and Perth, even then, I don't think. I mean, they didn't have it before. You want the two best teams making the final. Um, there's the reason why the top eight is the way it is. I don't see Aussie fans being behind it. They don't have it in the AFL, and that's a league which covers everything from Perth to Brisbane, and everything in between. They don't have a conference system. Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, and PNG. The money isn't there. I don't know where they're saying it's a great idea because financially it isn't there. The political stability isn't there. Be clear on that. PNG and Fiji. Fiji's had how many military coups and political unrest? PNG's got a lot of issues, a lot of problems. Lovely people. I mean, they're fantastic people, and they are rugby league mad, but they can't even figure out where the 18th team's going yet. The women's game is nowhere near the standard. There's a lot of infrastructure problems, a lot of corruption issues. There's a reason why the best players from those countries already play in Australia and New Zealand because of the potential for career and making money, which they can't make domestically. Even then, it wouldn't be profitable. I don't think it would make the money because bearing in mind you're going to have to pay salaries in Australian dollars, and then you lose that when you exchange it back to native currency. You're going to be worse off. It'll be cost more to run those teams than a normal NRL team. So there's the financial aspect to it. The Warriors have enough problems as it is, competing financially against the rest of the Aussie NRL teams, because they have to pay their salaries to be with exchange rate. This is you look at the North American leagues with the Canadian teams. They all agree to pay their salaries in US dollars. It's only the MLS and NHL that have multiple Canadian teams. And there's a reason why the Canadian teams haven't won a lot in the last 30 years, and that's to do with the exchange rate and getting free agents to be willing to sign in a place where it costs more to live, higher taxes, and the weather being shit in winter. Like, seriously, if you want to say to a potential free agent to basically say, oh, we want you to up sticks, we want you to come here, but the weather's shit in the winter, the taxes are ridiculous. Also, when you get paid in a foreign currency that you then have to exchange to the currency of the native where the team's based, and you lose money. And because, let's say, with the NHL Toronto, the market is obsessed, the media is toxic. You're going to hate it here because in the street, if you have a bad game, the locals are going to abuse you. Um, you can't go to, like, literally, just let's say in the off season, your kids playing little league, whatever. The fans recognise you. You can't even do that. Um, Very hostile environment. The expectation is ridiculous. Um, it's just, yeah. Sydney Bears, Perth Bears, Central Coast Bears. There's a few ideas of where the Bears franchise as a potential 18th team are going to go. The whole reason the Central Coast Stadium exists is for the Bears. Initially, anyway, with a previous bid. If the Bears bid goes ahead, it would have to be just put them on the Central Coast and call them the Central Coast Bears and keep the North Sydney Bears as their feeder team. I can't see taking. I mean, but you look at the Sydney teams already that take games to Perth, like the Rabbitohs, and Darwin, like Parramatta, a couple of games per season. Um, I can't see them splitting 60-40 and that being sustainable. Either you put a team in Perth, bang, and call it Perth West, the Perth Westerners or the Perth Outback, whatever name you want to put, Perth Serpents, Cobras, whatever, Dragon. Come up with insert animal or creature or whatever name there. Perth, can't have the Knights, can they? Can't have well, you could have the Crusaders, I suppose. You could have the Exiles, that could be a good one. The Wanderers, you insert name of mythical beast, mythical legend, whatever. Insert team name here, Perth team. But there would have to be every home game in Perth, apart from Magic Round. For the Sydney or Central Coast Bears to split 60-40, it wouldn't work. Perth Pirates, yeah, actually, I can get behind that. I can get behind the Pirates. It works. But again, it's the travel distance. They're going to have a great home record, really shit away record. It's like the Warriors. Great home, bad away. Except the Warriors this year are pretty good, home and away. But they're going to have a bit more support than the Dolphins have, because the Dolphins already had, the Queensland's Cup team, the history, the structure of the Brisbane competition. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not surprised the Steelers have bought out the Seal Dogs. Money. COVID the pandemic has really hurt a lot of sports. Massively. I'm not surprised by that turn of events. They already are a feeder. There's a lot of players on two-way contracts anyway, from the Steel Dogs and the Steelers. So Liam Kirk, for example, was a Steelers player on a two-way contract with the Steel Dogs. I saw him play before he got drafted. So that doesn't surprise me. That's a common sense decision. I'm surprised, for example, that more EIHL teams I do that with an NIHL team. That's my view on it. Yeah, yes, a Perth franchise would have financial backing, but it's salary capped, so it's all good having a wealthy owner to cover the club's losses, but there's a salary cap system, so they can't just spend money to bring players in. Salary cap. We've been having a salary cap now for a long time, but it would be financially stable. And Perth is a rapidly growing city. There is a lot of money there. There's a very young population there. They do have a good state league in Western Australia. A lot of registered players. I think Perth has been overlooked by the NRL for too long. I think the NRL have been very, very cautious in their expansion policy, um, whereas the AFL have been very aggressive in their expansion policy. Now, we can argue the pros and cons of both leagues and how they've gone about growing their domestic audience. They've also got to start looking at growing their international audience as well and how they do that. And I think COVID showed that the North Americans will watch both products. So when people are saying, there's a lot of people saying, oh, the NRL idea going to Vegas is going to be crap. I don't think it is. I think it's actually going to pay off. I think I think it will pay off. I think there are those people who say, well, the NRL, rugby league has tried before and the crowd numbers haven't been great. Look at rugby union. Then they've managed to sell out stadiums in the US. Um, so yeah, and look how the Canadian market bought into the Wolfpack initially before it failed. They were selling out their little stadium for warm-up games. So it's I think yes, I think rugby league in North America will work. I think this is not a flash in the pan idea. They've done their research. That's my opinion on things. Adelaide, Adelaide. Um, South Australia doesn't strike me as a rugby league location. It just doesn't. It did something about Adelaide. I mean, it could do if they get the right players to sign for the expansion team. It could work long term if they invest in grassroots. But South Australia, economically, is not on the same level as New South Wales, Queensland, or even Western Australia. Uh, it, it it doesn't have the economy outside of Adelaide, and Adelaide as a city doesn't have the same economic input per head. So economically, salaries, etc., um, as the other major cities either. Um, it's going to be interesting if they were to choose Adelaide as a location. It really will. In saying that, it could work if, as I say, that grassroots development, growing the junior game, growing the grassroots amateur game, the country game, investing. Problem is, South Australia has the highest percentage of residents living in the capital city, which is Adelaide. I think 75 to 80% live in Adelaide or the surrounding metropolitan area. The next biggest metropolitan area is Mount Gambier, which has got like 30,000 people. After that, we're talking really small town kind of country bumpkin levels of, oh Christ, no one's living here. Like 400 people in a town. South Australia, heavily Adelaide centric, and then there's not a lot else. So, like taking games out into country, rural locations, which they can do in Queensland, which they can do New South Wales with large regional towns and cities, you cannot do in South Australia. Even Western Australia, Perth still has a fair proportion of. So there are some pros and cons um, to growing the game outside of Perth and Adelaide as well. But they shouldn't be discounted. But there's a lot of talk about having a second team in New Zealand. The NRL has to be very, very. They have to look at it and go, okay, what's going to actually benefit not only the league but also uh, the, the game itself on a wider level. Um, that's what's got to be considered. Is what is actually going to be the most benefit for both the league and the sport generally. I would say Perth over Adelaide would have a better benefit. But if the right investment is made, yeah, a team in South Australia and Adelaide could potentially work. Or I think Perth is a better location, but Adelaide works better for travel and time difference. Saying that, a Central Coast team could work a treat. Look how the Warriors played there and the crowd numbers they got there during the COVID seasons before they returned home for this season. So, yeah, again, New Zealand, much like South Australia and Western Australia, outside of Auckland to a certain extent, Christchurch and Wellington, the regional towns and cities are a lot smaller. There is a lot less money, and you've got to expect fans to go and spend money. This is the key thing. This is what I'm saying about Adelaide. Disposable income, employment levels, corporate money. This is where I think they want to take the games to the US for the corporate sponsorship, getting an overseas TV deal, getting more eyes on the product internationally, to bring money into the game. And I think the US idea is going to work. I do believe that. I think there's a lot of people who are naysaying, but you know there is money out there and there is an audience out there that is there to be grasped. Um, in regards to New Zealand as an 18th team and having a second team in New Zealand, fans will turn up. They will. But will the team itself be financially viable with the backing, um, getting sponsorship on side? We know fans will turn up. That's not a problem. It's where you put it. You can't put a second team in Auckland. I would say Wellington, capital city, and then you could have you could then market that as the Raiders versus the Wellington whatever team you want to name them, as a capital rivalry, which would be fantastic. Nation capital versus nation capital. That'd be a fantastic rivalry to then market to the domestic audience in New Zealand and Australia, and then to the overseas audience. It's like they already have it in the NHL with the Ottawa Senators and Washington Capitals. They really market that rivalry. We've had some great players play for the Senators and some great players play for the Capitals, and they've had some pretty heated, matchups, regular season and postseason. It's doable. It's all about, however, looking at it on an economical point of view. Um, economical point of view, and this is where I think wherever the 18th team ends up, it has to be economically viable. There has to be massive investments in the grassroots game, from schools and youth level, outside school youth clubs, junior clubs, and also into your adults playing basically what I would call Sunday league football. In the community game, there has to be that investment. There has to be um, the infrastructure put in place, and obviously we saw the issues during COVID when the Trans-Tasman corridor was shut down and they had to basically move the Warriors based on a semi-permanent basis for 3 years to Australia. And there was talk about completely relocating the team permanently to Central Coast anyway. So the viability, and New Zealand sports mad just like Australia. They really overachieve in sport for their population size. Just look at the All Blacks against the Wallabies the last two games. First game they smashed them. That was, yeah. Second game not so much. They had to come from behind. But the first game they battered the Aussies. In New Zealand sport and culture, for a country with such a small population, they massively overachieve. And Australia's sports man as well. Again, we are debating where the 18th team goes. I think the NRL is probably going to play safe and probably going to end up on the Central Coast with the Bears. I think they have the strongest expansion, bid behind them. They bid before the infrastructure is already there. There is a willingness to get a foundation team back in the competition. They've already got a very good, set up with their New South Wales Cup team, which and the Central Coast, on the women's side of things, if you want to have an NRLW team there, they've got Central Coast Roosters. So there's already a very good community game and lower grade game on the Central Coast. Stadium is already there. The infrastructure's in place. The backing's already in place, and they've already had several bids before. So I think the NRL will play safe. While I would love to see a team in Perth, Adelaide could be a bit risky. I think they stay East Coast centric, which is a problem that the NRL has continually faced over the AFL. Um, but yeah, there's that. Um, let's see how the football results were there any early kickoffs, or were they all? I know Southampton had a game last night. And they took a lot of away fans. Let's have a look at who's playing whose day in the Football League, because obviously football season has returned, whether we like it or not. Um, but no, it's a nice discussion to have. Is where the NRL expands to next, and other major leagues like the MLS is expanding, Major League Rugby is expanding in North America. Is the NHL done with their expansion policy, or are they going? Will continue expanding. Um, so there's a lot to discuss. What else we got? Let's have a look at sports. Find some more sports headlines. Um, sports headlines. Sports headlines. Oh yeah, reading about their latest transfer embargo lifted by the AFL. I refuse to follow the football league until September. Well, you might miss out some great games. Um, another. Oh God, there's been a bit of transfer news. Japan have beaten Norway to reach the World Cup quarterfinals. We've got the World Cycling Championships. That's mountain biking. Celtic have gone three goals up. Um, Spain have progressed the Women's World Cup. Um, Chelsea have signed Sanchez from Brighton. Oh, guess what? The hundred's been washed out by the weather. Phillips has gone to Spurs from Blackburn. We knew that was happening. Uh, oh, Mark Marquez. Mark Marquez. People around him are saying he should stop. Um, wow, Mark Marquez. He's only 30. People are saying, "Oh, you got to give it up." I don't know. I don't think so. Oh, now this is just being broken since we've been doing the live stream. Bayern Munich await decision from Tottenham over Harry Kane. Bayern Munich are still waiting to hear from Tottenham about whether they are prepared to sell Harry Kane. They've made at least one offer. They've agreed personal terms already, so I think Kane's already going. I think Kane could put in a Bosman ruling, say let me go. He's only got a year left. Spurs, they could really foul this up. He's not. There's been no suggestion he's been willing to extend. Um, that, yeah, no agreement's been reached yet. They play Brentford on the 13th of August, so that's next week. Bayern want to get him in there before their Super Cup clash against Red Bull Leipzig. They want to get him in the squad. Um, transfer window closes on 1st September, so I think Harry Kane could go. I really do. Uh, but he doesn't want to be there. I don't think Harry Kane's wanting to be at the club for a while. I think Harry Kane has wanted to leave Tottenham for a while. The right offer hasn't come along. Bayern are offering them money. He doesn't want to extend his contract. Spurs want to make some money off the player that came from their youth system. I would follow the 100 if it wasn't a stupid made up format. I would never follow the 100. Sorry. It doesn't. It's not making any money. Let's be honest. They've had to rush the summer test series, the summer test window, to get this format in. The weather's crap. Like, it the way they've marketed it has been a disaster. The the fact that you know they're putting off existing cricket fans already, which even with the Ashes and the fact that the Ashes was like this really tense, great series. I didn't watch a single minute of it because it's behind a paywall, and peak viewership is still below 2005. So the ECB, I don't know what they're doing. But the 100, we already have a very good T20 format, which the ECB are doing their best to undermine completely since it was, brought in. Um, the ECB have made some really poor sporting and commercial decisions over many, many years. And while there is a passionate fan base in this country, they've been taken for sports fans in general have been taken for a ride in the UK for a long, long time. Our average ticket prices are higher than mainland Europe. I think they're higher than Australia and New Zealand for top level sport. So we're already charged more. Um, the 100 isn't. No, it isn't for cricket fans. But it's trying to encourage new fans to the sport, which it's not. Because the ECB have admitted it's not making any money. So losing money before COVID, COVID hits, lose more money, economic downturn, people have less money to spend, so lose yet further money. Ugh. The ECB had a good thing going with where the cricket was in the build up to the 2005 Ashes, and they bulged it up. They saw money signs, short term gain over long term gain. They saw short term profit over the long term growth of the sport. And then when COVID hits, can we have some money, please, Mr. Government, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Chancellor, Mr. Checker? We haven't got any money reserves. Yeah. So when we have to question where all the TV revenue's gone, where all the money went post 2005, because all these sports, all sport, we have to question why in the good times, before the financial crash and before COVID, we have to question where all the money has gone and where the money's been spent, because it does seem to me professional sport and the governing bodies of sport as well and other minor sports, but sport in general, we have to question where the money's gone with the sponsorship deals, the media deals, the TV deals, where the money has gone, because COVID hits, okay, and they're all going, please sir, can I have some? Can you put some change in the cap? We've got no money. Yeah, they've signed these mega TV deals. They've signed these sponsorship deals with these big sponsors, these corporate money. Where has the money gone? Where has it gone? And so to make money that they've misspent, to make money, they come up with things like the 100. They reformat things like the Champions League and Europa League and Conference League. They come up with these new formats. They come up with these new competitions. They expand competitions. But you still have to question, where has the money gone? Why are fans paying the price for complete and utter incompetence or criminality or both? Where's the money gone? Will Saudi Arabia get the 2030 World Cup? Oh God, I dread to think who has that next tournament, and who gets it. Well, considering that major sporting events, hosts are pulling out of hosting them, Commonwealth Games and Rugby League World Cups and stuff, I dread to look forward into the future. Let's focus on getting through, the rest of the year first, because we're seeing tournament hosts pull out all left, right, and centre, citing cost issues and not being, and all sorts of political problems. Let's not even go there yet, because that is going to become a big discussion point, considering all the debate around Qatar and how Infantino and some of his statements. Let's not go there yet, please. But I think football sold its soul long before Qatar got its World Cup. Oh, professional rugby union. I mean, look. Again, I'm going to go back to Augustine Pichot and what he was saying in the build-up to the 2019 World Rugby leadership elections and what he was saying 5, 6, 7 years ago. You know, the warning signs were there a decade ago that there is things not working with the professional setup and how money goes. Which we can go back to when the channel was first started. The problems that Welsh Rugby Union are facing now were facing then. COVID highlighted it. You know, professional rugby unions have money issues for a long time, and much like professional football having a lot of financial issues being highlighted for a long time. Here's the thing: they're not going away. Um, so with the things like the Super League and now more format ideas being thrown around by rugby and all that, this is being reactive rather than being proactive with the problems that are there. And it comes down to poor governance. It comes down to player agents um, getting a lot of money. It comes down to the clubs being willing to pay the players overinflated salaries. And rugby players, they get well compensated at the top level. Not as much as football players, but this is the problem. When at grassroots level, when you're at youth level at school, and you are an up and coming talented, athlete at school, boy or girl, and you see your career path, uh, you know, and you're given, let's say, four options. You've got football, cricket, rugby union, rugby league. There you four. Maybe ice hockey if you're already, part of the youth team and you're good at it. There you 4 or 5 options, right? Which one are you going to choose as progression? Well, ice hockey, the player base is still small, so you have a very good chance of actually making it to the EIHL or the NIHL in this country and getting a decent bit of money out of it, a bit of exposure, and have a decent career. And make the right contacts that post playing, you get a post playing career in something. Rugby league, if you're a fan of rugby league like I am in the south of England, good luck. You've only got the Broncos and the Scholars. A Cornwall joke, but Broncos and Scholars. Otherwise, you might as well give up on that. Although your average salary is higher than rugby union player. Although the money isn't what it once was. So that's not really a sustainable career path. Very small player base. The RFL obsessed with the north of England because it's traditional heartland. Doesn't want to really grow the game in the south, the west, or the east. Just the north, and isn't doing a very good job of protecting the game in the north because of the money problems, the infrastructure problems, and the game lagging behind where it was before. It's not as good as it once was. The best players are in Australia and New Zealand. Rugby union clubs go bust. Let that sink in. And if you want to play for your country, you have to play in England or Wales. Whereas Scotland is a little bit more flexible. With England and Wales, you hard to play domestically to represent your country, and then suddenly they go, well, I need to get paid, so I'm going to go play in France or the US now to get a paycheck because you guys can't actually guarantee to pay me on time. And then you get football where you can go, oh, you're 18 years old. Here, sign a contract. You're on 12, 15, 30, 40, 50 grand a week, which is a year's salary in these other sports. So you may have a better career in these other sports and be more but you can be a bang average player and get 50 grand a week. What are you going to choose? And then clubs are entering administration left, right, and centre and having transfer embargoes, but you can get paid. That's the state of British sport. Ice hockey, less money, but you're more likely to actually end up at the top level in this country, potentially in Europe, and decent money, a decent salary to live comfortably and get by. But not a lot of players choose that. Rugby league, unless you're in the north of England, good luck. And even then, the best players want to go to Australia and New Zealand. Rugby union, you're lucky if you're getting paid on time by clubs. So you look at France and North America because you've got to play in your home country to represent your country because that's just and the governance of the game's a joke, or football where you can be a crap player and get paid 50 grand a week to be a bang average player and sit on a bench, do a Calvin Phillips, play really well at Leeds, go to Man City, do nothing and get paid stupid money to do nothing. Danny Drinkwater, do nothing and get paid a wedge. So this is overpaid football players. Rugby clubs that have overpaid in the past now can't pay their players. Rugby league salaries have just stagnated. The talent drain is going to Australia. Ice hockey, will the team exist next season? But grafters, to play in that sport in this country, you've got to love the sport. So there you go. But yeah, no, when it comes to cooperation and working with governing bodies, they're all a mess. We've got multiple governing bodies in ice hockey. We don't have one. We have several governing the game in the UK. Football, all the FAs are separate. Rugby union, all the unions are separate. Rugby league is a mess at governance level. So the governance is chronic. Infrastructure, chronic. Um, and Football is still overpaying its talent. Rugby union has overpaid its talent and now can't pay its talent. Rugby league is losing its talent to um, uh, the NRL, some of the best players, and the pathways, unless you're in the north of England, don't exist because the RFL is protectionist and is stupid, much like the RFU, to be fair, and impotent. And again, governance is poor. I mean, this is where I think fans get frustrated. The club country debate goes out the window, in my opinion, because it doesn't matter if it's the national team or the club level. The administration is a joke. We're having the constant debate about player contracts, eligibility rules, when in reality, clubs are going bust. Rule changes are harming, not helping the game. Players are just giving up because, you know, of said rule changes and club finances. Then there's the player welfare aspects. A whole range of player insurance, the whole lot. And in football, there's weak governance. Player agents are not well regulated. You can be a really bad player and make a lot of money. No, seriously, even Hilario, remember him? Not the best goalkeeper. The third choice, sometimes fourth choice goalkeeper at Chelsea, made a lot of money by doing not a lot badly. So you can make big money doing not a lot. Some of the contracts are obscene, which has distorted the sport, which means clubs can't financially compete. There's the financial fair play BS, which is just cherry pick which club we're trying to. Oh, that club will go after that club. We'll go after that club. But we won't go. But this club can fit. The system is weak. It's a mess. Um, Various, governance side of the game, whatever sport we're looking at. We've had parliamentary inquiries into the FA, the RFU. Sports have gone to central and regional government asking for handouts after COVID. Teams go bust all the time. I mean, British ice hockey, how many teams have gone bust, come back, gone bust? Just infrastructure's a mess. In regards to British basketball, again, it's unfortunately trying to break down the walls of established sports culture. I think British basketball would possibly benefit from the NBA coming back on a regular basis, but they've decided to move on from the UK and look at, I think, continental Europe, where it is already more popular. But then again, you've got to look at, do is there the money there to invest? Is the money there to invest? Is the interest there from the wider sporting public? Um, I mean, are younger people actually turning off sport? I look at my analytics, so the video data and who views what, and ironically, there are more people over the age of 35 watching um, my videos, so my age group and above, well, I'm nearly 30, I'm nearly 34, so mid 30s upwards, than viewers from their mid 20s downwards. Um, so yeah, it would be the Surrey Scorchers, but we used to have the Thames Valley Tigers based up the road from where I live, and they don't exist anymore. They were national champions a few times. They had a great history. They don't exist anymore. Um, and again, the money isn't there. So while we can say, oh, the London Lions are building a decent team, and there's 4 teams competing in their version of the Champions League in Europe, blah 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 blah. Where's the press coverage? Where's the national coverage in the newspapers and on things like the Athletic and on the Sky Sports website, the BBC Sport website, and ITV News? And where is the coverage? Where is it? Because me, I'm not a fan of basketball. I don't enjoy it. I will still do basketball videos, but I don't enjoy basketball. It's not a sport that appeals to me. I can't get invested in it. I'm not saying it's a bad sport. You've got to be a great athlete to play it. There are those who enjoy the sport, and rightly so. For me, it's not a sport that I enjoy. Never enjoyed playing it at school. Don't really get invested watching it. I can appreciate those fans that do it, obviously, but where is the investment? Where is the media coverage? Where is the even people like me covering it? Where are the British YouTubers? Where are the British fans with their social media? Where is it? Because I'm not seeing it, and it has to be a cultural thing. It has to be, if the sport is to have a chance to grow. I think the NBA needs to look at coming back here. Um, and when we're talking about where the money comes from, here's the thing: professional sport doesn't care where the investment comes from until it's too late. They just care that money comes in, and the governing body or the league gets a cut of the revenue. They don't care where the money comes from until suddenly there's an investigation into corruption because there's money laundering or bribery or match fixing. Until those allegations come to light, the leagues and the teams don't care where the money comes from. They don't care until shit hits the fan and suddenly they have to care. So, in regards to Man City and their financial fair play breaches, no one cared at the time when they were bought. They suddenly care now because it's suddenly an issue. So there's that. Professional sport doesn't care where the money comes from until it's too late. Um, and for me, looking at, I mean, we were discussing Tom Brady investing in Birmingham City earlier. Um, Birmingham City fans don't care who invests in their club as long as some investment comes. In this case, it's Tom Brady. Why he's chosen Birmingham City, that's Tom Brady's decision. But it's like Wrexham. I mean, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. You know, Wrexham fans, obviously, yeah, there is that. Don't care. Well, they do care, but they don't care. They just care that someone gives a toss about their football club, is investing, has brought a little bit of success. The club status has improved. The stadium's getting some infrastructure. The town's getting some investment. You know, it's this is, I think, where you know professional sport and the money side of it falls down. Is there's not enough care and attention of who the investors actually are. Um, and then when it comes down the line, when we have these corruption scandals and teams are in financial chaos, suddenly people care. Oh, this guy's bought this football club, or this investor's invested in this league. And like Sir Alan Stanford, for example, with cricket, no one cared at the time that he was, the £20 million game. People started caring when there were allegations that he was running a Ponzi scheme. But they didn't care at the time. The ECB didn't give a fuck at the time because suddenly there was money. Ooh, money, lots of plastic case full of money, millions and millions of money. Suddenly, year two, oh, he's a crook. Oh, but oh, and there were no background checks done. professional sport, its flaw is they see the pound signs or the dollar signs or the euro sign. They see the money and they get greedy. 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, it turns out that when all this money comes in, there's some corruption with it. There's some sleazy characters with it. So yeah, there needs to be more oversight. There needs to be more transparency, and this is what's been called for a long time. It doesn't matter what league we're looking at, or what sport, or what team, or what third party payment to a player. This has been an issue for 30 years. We have seen it in every major league, in every major sport. There has at some point been a corruption scandal. There at some point has been a match fixing scandal. At some point, teams have basically gone bankrupt because the owners were dodgy. Not necessarily the team was dodgy, or they overspent. They didn't budget properly, or there was an economic downturn. But because they'd overspent when times were good, they didn't have any money for when times were bad. It doesn't matter if it's the US or here, or at some point there have been money problems in sport because the lack of oversight, greed has got the better of sports governance. There's been weak governance where they've just allowed money to be thrown around willy nilly, and suddenly when things are going wrong, there's allegations of corruption and match fixing, and because there's too much money in the system. Um, Far too much money in the system. This is where I've lost my love for association football, soccer, because it's lost touch of its roots, which is the working class. It's badly governed, has been for years. Corruption everywhere, um, and weak enforcement of the rules. And it is quite frankly a shambles. And so people go, "Oh, when's Harry Kane? When's Mbappe leaving? When's Harry Kane leaving? Oh, look at the Saudi money. Oh, it's a joke." It's like, well, the governing bodies have allowed it to become a joke for decades. It doesn't matter which league is considered the best league in the world or where the money's at. This is what's happened over a long period of time. You can go back and look at Italian football in the 80s. There was corruption. It's just the whole thing stinks. Can South Africa cricket bounce back, or is there too much government interference, or with the selection policy of X amount of players from each background playing? Um, I think at some point the fans are going to put pressure on Proteus and Cricket South Africa to do something. There's going to be fan pressure, I think, and again, not a mix, um, not a good mix. I think at some point there was a debate about rugby union as well. Um, the rugby union team managed to weather the political interference. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, and Bafana, even to a certain extent, with their football team, it's religion. And when you start interfering with that, you have problems. Um, so they've got to be careful because it doesn't matter what part of South African society you're from. The three big national sides, you start fucking around with the quality of those national sides and what the coaches are allowed to select for those national sides, doesn't end well. Does not end well. It never has. South African fans are, known for their views on selection quotas. They don't like it. Doesn't matter if you're from the black community. They do not like selection quotas. Um, they want to see obviously a more diverse national side to represent all the communities, but they don't want to. They hate the selection quotas, which means a good black player or a good Asian player or a good white player is not on the team bus because you've got a percentage of players from each background. That is a real big issue, um, and and I think that's going to become a problem where they're going to have to remove the selection quota. It's the Rooney rule in the NFL. Um, Select the best, regardless of background, um, because within the dressing room, that a player is there not because of their ability, but because of their background. Um, it creates internal division, which then, even if the player is a good player, because there's that internal division, um, then the team is less able to perform on the field. And when you've got the fact that they are reigning World Cup champions in rugby, and now they're having to weather this quota impact, which the South African rugby union side, the Springboks, weathered in the 2000s, the early 2000s. The cricket team are weathering it now, and there'll be a downturn. They will bounce back. I think what needs to happen is in the investment in the grassroots. South Africa doesn't have that money. That's where the ICC and World Rugby, for example, do need to step up. The governing bodies need to step up and go, okay, look, we need to fix problems. But again, money, and it's the way the ICC is structured. I've watched documentaries on it. India has far too much influence, and England's and Australia, to a certain extent South Africa, are their messenger boys. Their influence only exists because of India allowing them to have some. And South Africa is considered as the fourth nation alongside New Zealand, like that secondary tier in the ICC. And so that has a bearing on how funds are distributed. India has an unhealthy dominance of the international games governance. So yeah. And this is another reason why the ECB have signed stupid TV deals with Sky and not enough free-to-air coverage, because they know that the ICC is controlled by India, basically. They and Australia have signed some bad commercial deals. That's why the Ashes is overplayed, because of revenue sharing. They are the lieutenants, so to speak, of India, and then South Africa and New Zealand come next, and then the rest. And so those smaller developing nations constantly are getting screwed over by the ICC. And I've watched documentaries on it, and it is painful viewing if you are a cricket fan of how the game is governed, basically for the benefit of India, not for any other nation. India can basically say, well, if you want to vote against us, we won't tour your country for 5 years. You lose X amount of percentage of revenue. India can do that. They have the power to do that. That is how it works in the government. There is corruption, there's backhanders, there's dodgy dealings. India controls the show when it comes to cricket. And now they're using the IPL as part of that negotiations for revenue share. They use the IPL as a tool. They have the financial power to base. Let's say Bangladesh aren't happy with, I don't know, a World Cup format, for example. They put their hand up at the table and say, "We're not happy. Oh well, we won't play Test matches against you for 5 years. Oh, we're going to reduce the amount of revenue you get from the global revenues. There you go, we'll just turn the tap off." So the smaller nations stay in line because they are in fear of what India can do. And because England, Australia, and to a certain extent New Zealand and South Africa are pretty complicit with this because they make the most money. Even though New Zealand and South Africa are getting shafted as well, they will get more shafted if they go against what India want. It's how the dynamic works. It is ridiculous. India are basically holding the sport to ransom. There is far too much influence at the ICC from India. And that doesn't help South Africa's problems. I think it makes it a lot worse because South Africa are getting shafted by the ICC. And they're also getting shafted by their own government. New Zealand, as I say, a country that massively overperforms with population size, would be worse off if they stood up to the ICC. They're already getting a bad deal as it is. I think all the Test nations should have an equal share of the revenues made by Test cricket and one-day cricket, T20 cricket. That's not the case. not the case. Could the Saudi? Well, then it would make a mockery of all these human rights activist basketball players like LeBron James and all that. Make an absolute mockery of what they stand for. We've already seen players who've said, "Look, we stand with the gay community or anti-racism." Go to Saudi. So Jordan Henderson, for example, and Steven Gerrard, they have been slammed on social media in the last month for signing in up in Saudi. Because of some of their political stances over the last couple of years in regards to the LGBTQ debate at the World Cup and all that. And now, you know, so it just shows how the hypocrisy of professional athletes saying that they actually care about these social causes. They really don't. A lot do, but the ones that really make a song and dance about it, they honestly really don't. It's PR. If Saudi was to set up its own basketball league, I mean, I already don't care about basketball. I shouldn't really say that as a sports YouTuber who covers every sport, but really, basketball doesn't scream "I love me" as a sport. Um, and the top paid basketball players are massively overpaid, much like the top paid football players, massively overpaid. So I have no sympathy if they start up this basketball league and something the top NBA talent like a LeBron towards the end of their career, but I'll play over there for a couple of years. I would have no sympathy when it all goes wrong and when it's all fixed, because we know it is already in Saudi with the PIF owning 4 teams. The league is fixed before a ball's even kicked. The quality of play is crap. Yeah, basketball is a global sport that is very, very popular at participation level at school, education, university, a lot of professional leagues outside the NBA. Absolutely, I'm not disagreeing with that. Same with ice hockey in Europe. I'm not disagreeing with these sports being popular globally, be it amateur, grassroots, have get a couple of mates together and you just play a couple of hoops in the community, in the community park, as you do. To actually having organised amateur leagues all the way up to professional leagues. I'm not disputing the participation side of it. It's a very cheap sport to participate in. You can set up your own 2 basketball hoops in a park. All you need is a flat tarmac surface or rent. But it's when you have the fact that the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia basically owns the Saudi league, for example, in football, and owns 4 of the 4 biggest teams in that league. Makes it clearly a conflict of interest, and the salaries they're handing out are disgusting, and not in like, well, that's disgusting, as in like, oh, we're really happy and like this is a cool thing. This is like, no, it's not right when they're executing hundreds of people a week for having a cheeky beer. You get your hand chopped off if shooting people for being gay, stoning. I mean, come on, for speaking out against government oppression, you get murdered, basically, if you are a Saudi national. So there's human rights abuses that are on a scale that even, the European powers pre-World War II haven't even seen. Even post-Stalinist communism hasn't even seen. We've just arrested one day and shot the next. Even Stalin put his enemies in gulag for a few weeks to suffer before killing them. Seriously. And then post 1953, Khrushchev de-Stalinized and changed the internal workings of just internal exiles to Siberia. We're not going to shoot you, we're just going to go away for a while. We haven't seen in Europe until the Yugoslav wars and now what's happening in Ukraine and far western Russia, because there are atrocities actually happening in Russia. We have not seen these human rights abuses on this scale since 1945, apart from in the 90s and a little bit into now in Europe. Yeah, there'll be repressive measures taken in communist countries where you'll be locked up for dissent, but you weren't like literally taken out of public square and stoned to death, shot. A lot of countries in Europe got rid of the death penalty, for example, but most countries in Europe got rid of the death penalty. you can speak out against the government and be anti-government and still have freedom to protest. You can't do that. Fixing the whole thing is just, yeah, just. But then you can argue on laws, and it does, and and we're not perfect as countries, with what's happened in colonial times and decolonisation, but we are talking now, here and now. Um, I I have my reservations about Qatar. We know it was a corrupt bidding process. We know there were human rights abuses in Qatar in preparation for the World Cup. Was the fan experience in Qatar perfect? Yeah, it was all right, from what reports suggest. Although there were some issues of problems in the fan zones and the alcohol controlled areas. Um, I think the impact. Oh, show me the money. That's possibly one of the funniest scenes in film history. And that is a sports film. It's a sports agent and his star player. Class Jerry Maguire as a sports film because it's got um, Cuba Gooding Jr. as the player, Jerry Maguire as the sports agent. He's losing all his clients. He's the only athlete willing to sign on with him, and it shows the dynamic between sports agent and his player and the relationship between them. It's a great film, fantastic. It's one of the few Tom Cruise films I actually like. Is Jerry Maguire. Show me the money. Um, why is the internet being slow? The weather is impacting my internet connection. We've got thunderstorms and we've got power outages. We've got this North Atlantic storm coming in called Storm Anthony, which is wreaking havoc across Northern Europe. So it's going to be a struggle. But no, Jerry Maguire is one of my favourite films, and I would class it as a sports film. The Last Boy Scout's another one with Bruce Willis. Again, that deals with sports corruption. Um, but no, Jerry Maguire. Show me the money. Show you the money. No, no, no. Show me the money. Yeah, yeah. Show you the money. No, no. Say, show me the money. Show me the money. Say it louder. Show me the money. Louder. Show me the money. And he eventually goes, say, I love black people. I love black people. Say, show me the fucking money. Show me the money. And he's having that is the moment where in that film it's the crux, the turning point of the film because he's basically had all his clients nicked by his rivals. He's basically going to lose his job, and he sets up his own sports agency. And he uses Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character as his marquee signing, saying, "I'm going to be this guy's agent. We're going to make him one of the best NFL running backs and wide receivers. He's going to be the guy. He's going to win the Super. We're going to win the Super Bowl, and then he's going to try and attract other star athletes to sign with him." I'm surprised they didn't make a sequel or a sequel in that series of films where he reprises the role as Jerry Maguire, and then it's how he built the sports agency. That would have been fantastic. But possibly it is a sports film. Waterboy. The Waterboy is a piss take on The Longest Yard, which Adam Sandler also did a remake of The Longest Yard, which is also Mean Machine. Happy Gilmore. Is it truly a sports film, or is it just Adam Sandler doing Adam Sandler things? They're more cheesy Adam Sandler comedies that have a sports element to them. The Longest Yard is a true sports film out of those three, but there are obviously sports elements where Sandler plays a hockey player, plays golf, he then goes plays golf. Waterboy, he plays a guy who's educationally retarded, special needs student who happens to be quite good at high school, college football. But I don't think you could make those films today. in the same way. They would have to change them, and they wouldn't be as funny. Um, but ironically, the Water Boy is literally a piss take on American football. It really is. It takes the piss out of American football um, because of the collegiate system and how you don't have to be particularly smart to get into college, get a sports scholarship, and not be. And it's taking the piss out of people like Gronkowski, basically, um, and and how also that you know collegiate high school players are manipulated and used, and the pro sports don't care. They honestly don't care. They're now called student athletes rather than pros, basically. And the South Park skit with Cartman when he basically is the slave trader, deep South gentleman. Oh, you're student athletes, and then he's offering to pay X amount of money for an African American student, X amount of money for a white student, um, because around the fact that they're classed as student athletes is a way they get around them not being professional, even though they are getting sponsorship deals. Basically, the NCAA athletes are commodities. They're not treated very well. The whole NCAA system is dodgy. Um, it really is. Um, and and South Park takes the piss out of it. Um, and happy and the Water Boy is generally a piss take on collegiate football and the NCAA. So it's basically an FU to the NCAA. But you've got to be smart to realise this. Most people see it as Adam Sandler playing an intellectually disabled person who plays American football, right? And it's taken and it also shows how also you can just get on the sports program and not be particularly bright or particularly gifted, as long as you're athletic, get on a sports program. And and at the whim of the NCAA, that college that signed up may go, well, we'll just take the funding away then, and we'll put the funding in. If the team starts struggling, we'll reduce the funding. We'll reduce the funding for this sports program. We'll put it into our ice hockey program, or basketball program, or baseball program, or soccer program over, which is why Adam Sandler's team suck because they haven't won for a while. They're on a bad run. The facilities they use are crap. Their equipment's not up to standard. The team's morale's low. The coach is struggling, and it is basically an FU to the NCAA. I haven't watched enough of it, but some big nations have gone out. I think I'll probably watch some of the knockout games if I can. It's partly because of the time of day it's on. Nick Saban, highest paid government employee. Yeah, the NCAA they basically now admitted they are student athletes are basically pros in all but name. But the NFL as well, who drafts from the NCAA, the NBA to a certain extent now, they've got the affiliate league system. The NHL to a certain extent, they basically use the NCAA to do a lot of their player development for them, where they're not actually having to pay players their entry level contracts. So yeah, the NCAA is a great workaround from the professional sports where they're saving money. Yet these athletes are putting in professional hours in training, conditioning, playing, rehabbing from injuries. I think the coverage of it, it is quiet. It's not being pushed as much. I think the time of year they're playing it that month later. It is causing some sporting headaches in Australia and New Zealand for stadium availability. The NRL and the AFL have had to move games to different states. Well, they're using cricket grounds for NRL games, like the Gabba, for example. So Brisbane and Dolphins, and to a sense, Gold Coast can play games because their own stadiums are being used. Stadiums in Sydney, we're seeing double headers, for example, being like the Newcastle Knights are playing games outside of Newcastle because the stadium's being used. Um, so there is some stadium availability issues that are impacting the domestic leagues in Australia that they're having to work around. And the logistics there, and also they're playing the Women's World Cup at a time when the Rugby League and the AFL are in their latter stages of their seasons. You've got the women's NRL season just started, and they're trying to play an international tournament where a lot of eyes domestically, the domestic fans, are not on the World Cup. Um, this is the problem of having a World Cup in a Southern Hemisphere country um, when their domestic leagues are also playing time of year. Um, Although the weather conditions have been pretty favourable, I will say that. Certain schools you've got to have high grades to play. Like Notre Dame though is yeah, that's Notre Dame and Harvard and all that. You've already come from money to get in there. Or most schools you don't need high grades to. Yeah, the NCAA is a flawed thing. Student athlete. So yeah, the, the the TV and film have already parodied what the NCAA are doing. Um, you do have Jerry Maguire, you do have the last good Boy Scout. They knew that high profile athletes, even the high profile, well paid athletes, were being ripped off by their agents and by their teams 20, 30 years ago when they were making these films. South Park has been ridiculing, the NCAA for years. Am I looking forward to the Rugby World Cup? Yes and no. I'm not. I'm not as excited about this World Cup as previous World Cups. Um, I think rugby union as a sport is still going to face a lot of issues, and it's not facing them particularly well. Um, I still think there are so many issues with the club game that haven't been resolved. Wales are going to get thrashed, quite frankly. That's my personal view on the Welsh situation right now. Obviously, a month ago, a month and a bit ago, we were having a debate about what social unrest in France, whether that could happen again. It seems to have calmed down a little bit, but there's going to be another incident in France where there's a flashpoint. I would reckon security will be tight, but there's been some high-profile incidents in the last couple of years at sporting events and in just general in France that raise concerns about security and potential social unrest and fan security and things like that. But overall, I'm not. I think the the coming days and weeks, I think it'll be ramped up. But it was like this in 2011. When I was with my ex-partner, I was visiting where she was living. She lived on the edge of southwest London, of course. I had to change trains to Twickenham. And we had to go to a wedding this day. And I had to go, meet her. And I didn't realise that England were playing Wales in a World Cup warm-up game. Right, this was the last warm-up game at Twickenham when I'm getting the train. And it was the first time I was going to see my ex-partner where she lived. So I've already been going up. It's the first time I'm visiting her family, get the train to hers, and I get to Twickenham and I'm changing trains because there's multiple platforms. And I asked the station staff, "Is it this platform?" Well, you want to hurry up. I said, "Why?" Well, she goes, "There's 80,000 pissed rugby fans are going to be descending about now." As she said that, the first fans came through the turnstiles, and I'm like, "Shit! I've got to change platforms quick." Um, and yeah, England beat Wales that day. I wasn't aware there was a warm up game taking place, and I was like, "Shit! I've got to go to a wedding reception in about an hour or two's time, and I've got to get changed for it, and I'm going to be crushed on a train for. I have to get two more trains." And I'm like, "Shit!" I wasn't aware. That was in 2011. I was as sports mad then as I am now. Yes, they could. I think there's a bit of fatigue at this time of year. There's several reasons why I've made less content this summer than what I was before. Firstly, I have been a bit ill, and I have been quite busy with work. But I'm also feeling that sporting fatigue. It's this time of year where I feel fatigued sports-wise. I'm going. I'm getting. This is normally when I was at school and in my early 20s. Summer was. I would be barbecues, house parties, going to the pub, going to nightclubs, days out. Now that I've got a bit older, I still have that kind of mindset of this is my downtime. July and August is my downtime. this is when I would be watching the cricket back in the day as a teenager, because the cricket would go on into September. They've rushed this year's Ashes series because of the 100. Well done. Which may have had a bearing on how the series played out as a two-all draw with the third test being disrupted by the weather. That may be a bearing on it. If it had been spread out over a longer period, we might have had a series similar to 2005, where it was a 3-2, and we may have worked around some of these weather delays. We will never know. I wouldn't say I've tuned out of most sport since the start of June. I've still been paying attention to various things. I've still been doing content. But I would say I felt that fatigue. And I think, in part, having a delayed Rugby League World Cup and the Football World Cup taking place basically days apart at the end of last year, and which meant a delay to the finish of the football season so late into June, and now it's already started again. I'm like, where has the transfer window gone? Um, you know, the I yeah, I have felt a bit fatigued. Um, but I always seem to feel a little bit out of it in July and August. It's always the time when I'm like, I think um, it's a time of year where I do just wind down a bit. Although in saying that, there has been a lot going on, and maybe I should do more weekly live streams every Saturday, for example. I think there's a lot to discuss. Um, well, the European, qualifying rounds for Champions League, Europa League, Europa Conference League. Look, uh, this is where I think the UEFA coefficient and the structures of those tournaments are not right. Um, I think what UEFA have done is pander to a handful of big clubs who threaten the European Super League, and they do this every couple of years. Um, and in reality, we've got European Super League Light coming in with the proposed format changes. They keep fiddling with the European formats, and I don't think it actually benefits anyone apart from team owners with money and players maybe with appearance bonuses. And I don't think even all players want to play as many games as they're being asked to play per season. We are seeing more injuries. We are seeing more players, getting fatigued. Um, we are seeing more players, getting fatigued. Um, we are seeing it impact the quality of games we see on a week-to-week basis. Um, we are seeing, players having burnout. We're seeing players become less consistent with performances, missing more games due injury. Um, I think it's the old formats of the old Cup Winners' Cup when you would get let's say a Haverford West, for example. Let's say they win the Welsh Cup, hypothetically, and they enter the Cup Winners' Cup first round, and they're playing against, insert big name European club. But that is an interesting story of an underdog playing against the big boys. They might knock them out over two legs. They might actually have that David versus Goliath moment. But when they've got to go through 3 or 4 qualifying rounds to get to the first group stage, and it's too much. Do I think the fixturing already is too much? I think we're going to have to look at the League Cup and FA Cup and how they're structured around, and the Football League Trophy, how they're structured around the Football League and Premier League season. We're already seeing replays slowly disappear from each round. In my lifetime, every round used to have a replay. To now, I think it's up to the third round they do replays. And during the COVID disrupted years, it was to the second round. I think FA Cup replays disappear. I think they're going to restructure the League Cup yet again. The Football League Trophy yet again is going to be restructured. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. But we'll see how it plays out. Do I think it's too many games? Look, as things currently stand, we have clubs in the Football League like Reading that could cease to exist soon enough. Do I see the purpose in the Football League Trophy? Yeah, it's revenue for those League One and League Two clubs. It is important to them. Um, it brings in that extra revenue. Because they're not good. Most league clubs don't progress to the latter stages of the League Cup and FA Cup, so it's to substitute those latter stages. It is extra revenue, and it's been part of the Football League for a long time. Look at the football club histories that I've done. Still got to do York. I'm going to do York City later because I've got some more. I can use the football animal sheet because I remember I read that and York City finished bottom. Um, oh yeah, the develop. Yeah, get rid of the youth teams from it. Absolutely, they can play in the Youth League Cup then. I've never liked that. Fans of those lower league clubs didn't like it either. Um, and look, at the end of the day, it is a big revenue earner for those lower league clubs. Um, and it does mean it's you can't sell that if you cannot sell. Let's say I don't know. Let me just think of a. You can't sell me Wrexham versus Chelsea youth. You can't sell me that. Wrexham versus Newport County, you can sell me because that's a rivalry. You can sell me that. Wrexham Shrewsbury, you can sell me that. Shrewsbury versus Aston Villa, you can't sell me that. Wrexham Shrewsbury, you can sell me that because those clubs hate each other. The fan bases hate each other. It would be a sellout. You would have 16,000 Shrewsbury and Wrexham fans wanting to kill each other. The players wanting to kill each other. The game itself will be full of passion and excitement. It won't be a ball 0-0 draw. It'll be a thrilling 0-0 draw. Cannot sell me Wrexham or Shrewsbury versus Chelsea or Aston Villa reserves. You cannot sell me that. But you can sell me Wrexham Shrewsbury, yes. But this is unfortunately the football league. The clubs need money, and the Premier League clubs have the money. They want their players to get development time. The loan system is already broken. The transfer market's already broken, and the money isn't properly distributed, and the TV rights shit. The TV deal for the lower leagues is shit. We've discussed this so many times. Oh look, people said when Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney bought the club, it was a PR stunt. They're clearly committed long term to staying and owning this team. I mean, Ryan Reynolds was also interested in getting the Ottawa Senators and putting together a bid for the Ottawa Senators in the NHL. So this is not a publicity stunt. I think they are there for the long term. And yeah, I think they could get promoted. Anything's possible. Anything. Look at what Luton have done. Anything's possible. Um, the fact that Luton are having issues with their stadium to make it Premier League compliant. Well, Bournemouth Stadium isn't much bigger than Kenilworth Road, and there are plans by Luton to have a new stadium in place in the next few years anyway. That is more modern. Um, Newport, Wrexham, yeah, no, they don't like each other. Wrexham is the team for the rest of Wales versus the big three from the south. Wrexham is the rest of Wales versus Cardiff, Swansea, and Newport. Football fans outside of those areas gravitate to Wrexham. It's not just the city of Wrexham; it's the rest of Wales versus the other three clubs from the south. Yeah, that would be tasty. You could sell me that. You could sell me Wrexham Shrewsbury, but you cannot sell me Wrexham versus Bournemouth reserves. You can't sell me that. They have done historically. There is there. I think because in more recent times, because Wrexham being out of the Football League for so long, I think younger fans don't realise the dislike between the clubs, between Wrexham and the other clubs, because they've been in the non-league. Newport fans, to a certain extent, maybe a little bit more, but those younger fans, I don't think fully appreciate that. For a period, Wrexham was the best Welsh club for a period. I don't think they fully appreciate the rivalry that used to exist. So we've had a generation of fans who've missed out on a rivalry because of Wrexham's financial position for so long. And because Swansea and Cardiff have been Premier League sides at various points and have won silverware at various points or competed in finals where Wrexham haven't, there is that as well. And because Wrexham are now also barred from the Welsh Cup, and as are the other Welsh sides that play in the English system, you miss out on that rivalry as well. Um, but yeah, I think promotion is not without the realms of possibility. Yeovil did it. Fulham have done it, going up the leagues very, very quickly. It's all about sustainability. Yeovil couldn't sustain it, whereas Fulham sort of could. Luton have shown what they can do, their story. Um, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, the Welsh Cup. That's been a bit of a discussion point since the Welsh FA's prevented English sides and those Welsh sides that play in the English system from entering. It's devalued the competition. But then the cup doesn't exist anymore anyway. So what is? What the under 23s if they win does know. Yeah, look, again, development sides entering the cup competition when the main teams aren't allowed. It devalues it. It just says to the lower football league clubs, "Oh, your little competition's not worth anything." It devalues it. It's devaluation. Um, while it's great for the individual players getting that development time against senior pros, it devalues what the competition's all about. Um, Cardiff play Leeds and Haverford on the same day. Well, there's an issue in itself. What happens if a senior player goes down? They've got to call up a player from the under 23s, and he's already the other side of Wales. Again, it's a nightmare. But this is the problem that the cup competitions face: is they've been devalued for years. Yet we constantly harp on about how the Challenge Cup is the pinnacle of rugby league, and the FA Cup's the pinnacle of you know professional football, and every player wants to win it. They show it around the world. Yet we've devalued both these cup competitions for a long time. And which game would I watch? Neither, really. Cardiff and Leeds don't like each other, so we know there's going to be a police presence. We know there's going to be crowd disorder. That's going to be the news headlines coming out of Cardiff Leeds. Cardiff Haverford West, 5 men and the dog will turn up to that because the Welsh Cup has been devalued for 30 years. I, I, I You can't sell either to me. I'm not a Cardiff fan, I'm not a Leeds fan. Cardiff Leeds, the police presence and the crowd disorder is going to be making more headlines than the actual game. Cardiff Haverford West, 5 men and a dog, and maybe a burger van turn up. The weather's crap. It might even get called off yet with this bad weather we're having with Storm Anthony. Bluebirds, brilliant. They're both called Bluebirds. Fantastic. You couldn't make that up. But that's the reality of it. The but as I say, like I think where we're at with professional football, to a certain extent, professional rugby league, the Challenge Cup's been devalued. The FA Cup's been devalued. Then we talk about the League Cup and the League Trophy being devalued, and now the Welsh. Yeah, the TV deals in place aren't good enough. And then you look at the squad changes like managers do with their cup teams. It's not a good look when you have like 10 changes to a match day squad from a cup game to a league game. That doesn't sit well with me. Oh, look, yeah, but you would want it to be a full strength Cardiff side rather than the under 23s. That's the problem. If you are a Welsh football fan, what would you rather see? An under 23s team win the Welsh Cup or just the Welsh club win the Welsh Cup? Anyway. Could a UK Super League break away? In what regard? Are we talking professional football? Are we talking rugby union? The only sport that has a national league is ice hockey. That's the only sport that has a national top level is the Elite League Ice Hockey, where all the home nations are represented with at least one team. Rugby league, we already have a Super League and it's shit. I don't know where else we can go with it. We tried to get Canadian teams in it, and they don't exist anymore. One of them has moved to Cornwall, and the other one's gone bust. We've got two French teams in the league system. It the Super League, um, were when it was thought up initially. Yes, the standard of rugby league improved, facilities improved, the money was there. Um, that isn't the case anymore because powers that be have mismanaged the sport so long that the best talent's starting to go to Australia. And the talent we get from Australia is second-hand damaged goods of players who couldn't crack it in the NRL, who couldn't even crack it in reserve parade at times. Let that sink in. We lose our best players. There are loads of players in the Super League who probably would fit perfectly into an NRL side. Piece of piss. The NRL players that come the other way, they are damaged goods. They've either failed to establish themselves or they can't crack it even at reserve grade. So I'm just let that sink in. Does the EIHL work? Yeah, it does and it doesn't, because there's no unified governing body of the sport in the country. There were, I think it was a meeting last year where they were planning to just get one governing body, and it didn't pass. We've seen teams lose arenas. We've seen teams go out of business. Basingstoke don't have a team this year, for example. They've mothballed. They may never come back. Bracknell have lost their arena. They now play in Slough. The Steel Dogs have been bought out by the Steelers in Sheffield. The Whitlink Raiders, or the Isle of Wight team, their arena's been under lock and key for a decade. Romford basically were homeless for the best part of a decade. Hull have had multiple teams. So while the sport's healthy with participation levels and fan levels and players, the development, massive quality improving, there have been some rules brought in with the number of overseas players in court. Yeah. Money's always been an issue. The exposure's been an issue. What biggest fan? It's got to be Sheffield. Sheffield or Nottingham have probably got the biggest fan bases. The Steelers and the Panthers. They've got the biggest rivalry in the sport. Belfast Giants, I think, do quite well. But I would say it's either Nottingham or Sheffield. And if you look online, just type in the Battle of Lower Parliament Street. I think it was an 18-minute bench clearing brawl, and it took 45 minutes for play to be resumed. That was back on 2000. It is possibly one of the most heated rivalries in the game in the UK, maybe in the game, in sport. I don't think North American fans fully appreciate how much hate Sheffield and Nottingham as cities have for each other, let alone. So when Nottingham Forest plays Sheffield United this season, there's hate in that rivalry. The Panthers, Steelers, there is hate in that rivalry that goes back donkeys. How many teams are in the leagues? I'm going to have to check because Basingstoke have pulled out. The Elite League, Milton Keynes pulled out, and you had the Edinburgh Capitals folded. I'm going to have a look at that. I think it's 10. I think it's 10 teams in the Elite League at the moment. I think it was 14 at one point at peak. The National League, I think, is a similar number of teams. I think money's an issue for a lot of teams, operating budget and actually having enough money to get through a season. We go from every off-season to every off-season going, which team is going to go bust next, or which arena is going to close down next, or which team is going to mothball for a season or two. Well, there's riots. No, well, I've seen a bit of fan football, hooligan levels, nothing like that. There's the odd pisshead and the odd idiot, but nothing on the level of what you see in European football. Not even close. But there's the odd idiot. There's the odd fan who does something stupid. But there's bench clearing brawls. If you want to see, just type in the Battle of Lower Parliament Street, Nottingham Panthers, Sheffield Steelers, 2001 on YouTube. There is the full bench clearing brawl And then there is an ex-player who was involved in the match giving an interview on a podcast with images, um, um, with video footage in the background while he's giving his interview. Um, it's almost like there's a Valentine's Day massacre in the NHL. It's brutal. I didn't watch any of the Open either. I don't watch golf. My golf viewing now is very, very limited. Um, and again, it's to do with what the PGA and the DP Tour and MLB Golf and all this. The TV rights domestically, they're gone. They're all behind a paywall, which has cost a lot of fans. A lot of fans have switched off. There's a lot of the lads I work with go to have rounds of golf and go to the driving range. A lot of the lads I work play golf on a weekend, on the regular. But yeah, my golf fandom is gone. Um, I used to watch Augusta all 4 days. I used to watch the Open all 4 days. That isn't the case anymore. Um, and a lot of it's to do with the domestic networks here in the UK, so the BBC in this case, deciding to not continue with their golf coverage. They shot themselves in the foot. They had brilliant golf coverage for many, many years. And they decided to walk away from it, and show no interest in continuing to be a broadcast partner for the sport. So Sky was like, okay, we'll take the lot. And then the other free-to-air commercial broadcasters have shown no interest. Players to go to the last Winter Olympics. I think it's in the CBA that they let them go. There are plans for another World Cup of ice hockey, but it's not IIHF, it's NHL led. Which we already have the World Championships. I think the players want to play at the Olympics. The players want to represent their countries. And the last World Cup of hockey was crap, let's be honest. Players want to represent their countries, but if it's an NHL-led World Cup, it's going to be just as crap as the last time. The NHL, I think, in the current CBA has basically given ground on the players going to the Olympics. They were going to go to the last Olympics. Of course, COVID and the restrictions that the Chinese government had in place meant they couldn't. They decided to withdraw. The players said, we're deciding to withdraw. We don't want to, but we felt like we had no choice. The team owners would rather the players didn't go to the Olympics. But in order for the sport to continue to develop globally, which it has, the best talent has to be able to play at international level. It's that club country debate. We always have it in every sport. It doesn't matter if it's the fans or the team owners. The players always want to play for their country. And the debate has been there for a long time about that. But if it's an NHL-led World Cup, it will be crap. If someone offered you a free ticket to see the last grouping at the Open, would you go? What, the last round? What, in day one or day four? I don't know. I don't mind watching golf on TV when I have watched it because I find it relaxing. But to stand at, let's say, the 18th green or the what Amen Corner, is it Amen Corner at the Augusta National for 4 days in the same spot or that area? I'll get bored. I couldn't do that. I can watch it on TV because I can just have it on in the background and I can tune out. I can flick to another event or something else, and I can, if there's something, because I can have it as background, I can listen to the commentary, and I don't have to actually view it. I would actually get bored. I appreciate the perseverance of golf fans. I really do. I really, really do. But for me, golf as a sport is a sport I've fallen out of love with. And a lot of it is to do, again, with the TV rights and how the domestic broadcasting, especially the free-to-air broadcasting, walked away. And the money men have look at what's happened recently with the last little bit with LIV and the PGA and DP Golf and millionaires throwing tantrums about who gets what money and the bad optics and the bad PR. And in reality, it was all about money and money and money and money. And in the end, it was always about money. It wasn't about the ability to play where you want and the format you want to play. It was all about money and who and money. I'm as I said, we've seen it before in every major sport where there's a rival competition, a rival sports league, it gets absorbed by the original league it wants to break away from. Every time. I've talked about the Saudi League. It's going to turn out like a Chinese Super League Mark II because it's government controlled basically now. The public investment fund in Saudi Arabia has got involved. And to be fair, if you're a businessman in Saudi Arabia, you've got to be pro government anyway. So it's going to be rigged as fuck. Yeah, not worth watching. So a lot of these players are going to very quickly regret going there. But it is what it is. But I don't watch club football anyway unless it's the FA Cup. So to me, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. I'm not losing any sleep over it, really. No, it's actually ranked the 64th league in the world for quality, the coefficient. It's not a top 10 league. It's not even the top 50. The MLS is 30 leagues above it in its FIFA coefficient ranking for quality. So yeah. So for me, club football, I don't really watch a lot of club football. Again, that lack of free-to-air coverage is a problem. Taking the Champions League and Europa League off free-to-air coverage was the biggest blunder UEFA could have done, and domestically we could have done with the TV rights. And the constant format changes was again another blunder. I mean, too many games, too many dead rubbers, and fans get fatigued. Both watching on TV and going to games, fans just do not have that much disposable cash. I don't know where these club presidents, club chairmen, and UEFA think we got all this money coming from because we don't have it. The average salary has stagnated. The living standards across Europe have stagnated for the most part. Unemployment's gone up. People in my age demographic are worse off than our parents, and the people in the younger, my brother's generation, who was that's 12, 15, that bit younger, they're even worse off than I am. So yeah, the FA Cup, reformatting the format when the football league clubs in the lower leagues and then the top league clubs join. Personally, I would like to see all the football league clubs and Premier League clubs joining the first round. Personally, because then you can get some real interesting matchups earlier on. So those non-league clubs and lower league clubs get a bigger payday earlier on. But they formatted it the way they have for a long time. I think it's to give some of the lower league clubs a fairer chance to get through to the latter stages and go on a cup run for revenue purposes and be able to win games. And it's just how they fixture it. High power prices and food prices in Australia is ridiculous. Australia is not as bad for cost of living as it is in Europe. I can tell you that for a fact. Australia did quite well out of the financial crash as well, the economic downturn following the stock market crash in the late 2000s. Australia did quite well. Your average salary for my job is 3 times higher in Australia to do the same job that I'm doing here, full time. So I wouldn't mind going to the land down under. I would say the cost of living crisis or the cost of living is higher in places like Sydney and Melbourne. But if you were to go to a place like, I don't know, rural or regional New South Wales or regional Queensland, like let's say Rockhampton as a location, or Wagga Wagga, suddenly you're all right. If you can work remotely, you're all right. So the cost of living in Sydney and Melbourne is ridiculous. The cost of property is a big driving factor behind what's going on in Australia economically. Property prices are ridiculous, but we've had property prices like this in Europe for 30 years. So welcome to catching up to the 21st century. But I wouldn't move to Sydney or Melbourne. I would go to a more regional city. I would happily do it. £10 pop. I think I'm even more £100 pop, but uh, £10. I don't. Right now, I'm in minus money. I owe the bank like 480 quid, so I'm in my overdraft. I've got to pay my council tax, which is my rates, basically my regional rate tax rates, property tax, basically property tax. Even though I'm in a rental, I've got to pay the council tax. Um, so I owe the bank money. So I'm the minus £10 pop. I'm minus £400 pop. I would happily come to Australia. Happily, in a heartbeat. I'll do it tomorrow. I would happily do it tomorrow. Um, but but look, I've been in the overdraft now for over 2 years. I don't know what not being in debt is anymore. Yeah, no. Back in January when I did my mental health video, which was actually really got a lot of people interested and a lot of people talking. At that point, I'd been stuck in debt for a year and a half. It's now been 2 years. 2 years I've been stuck in my overdraft. Now I should hopefully be coming out of it soon. I've just had a pay rise. I've saved more money than I thought. Um, I'm getting out of the hole I'm in, but at points this year I've had to use food banks. I've got into renter. I've got into council tax arrears, so my property rate taxes. I've got into tax arrears. I think at one point I was in rent arrears at one point, only for a week. But at points over the last 3 years, I've either been in council tax or rent arrears, or both. I've run out of food. Um, I've had to go to food banks now. Um, it has taken a toll on my mental and physical well-being. Absolutely. The last 2 years have been brutal. The first year of COVID, actually, I did all right. The first year, full year of the COVID restrictions, I did all right. The last 2 years, yeah, not so much. The first year and a half, I was all right. The last 2 years, not so much. More so this last 12 months. Um, and the last couple of weeks, I have not been particularly well. Yes, I have lost a bit of weight. I'm aware of that, but I've been feeling run down for a while. The last couple of months, I've been tough. In fact, the last 4 months, I haven't eaten properly, and I'm not joking. I'm not lying. I'm not trying to ask for sympathy. I have been struggling to feed myself. I've actually made my food bank food last me about a month and a half. I'm not even halfway through it yet. Um, does the UK have a problem with rent increase? No one can afford to buy here, but yes, my rent has gone up a fair amount. It's going to go up again. I can just about afford to live where I am now. And this is what I'm going to hark back to the sport argument here when we're talking about ticket prices and merchandise prices and um, team owners don't care. As long as the merchandise gets sold, they don't care. This is where the average fan has been priced out of going to games. I haven't been to a sports game for 4 years. Can't afford to go. Can't even afford to go see my local ice hockey team play. Can't afford to go. I know my local food bank were really. They let me cherry pick what I wanted, so I actually got food that I'm not going to waste. Apart from the cuppa soups, I got a lot of cuppa soups. I hate cuppa soup. But I got mac and cheese. I got tinned mac and cheese, and I love my mac and cheese. And all I've got to do now, I've got some herbs I'm going to add to it. They gave me chocolate. Food bank chocolate is like, oh, this is the store brand Morrison's Own. This is unedible, and it was. But I ate it because I was starving. I demolished my pack of McVitie's chocolate digestives this morning. I want 3 biscuits today. I think tonight I'm going to have curry flavoured noodles, I think. Maybe mac and cheese. But I've got to add the herbs to it because Tesco value mac and cheese. Tesco value. I don't know what it would be in Australia with Coles, I would have thought, or Woolworths. It is very starchy, very flour based. It is nasty stuff, but it'll keep you alive. I've got so much tin soup, it's unreal. Uh, and I might do myself some soup tonight with some bread. I've got some bread, but they let me. I said to them, I'm a fussy eater, and if you have got a food intolerance, say that I don't eat this, don't eat that. My local food bank said, cherry pick what you want. Tell us what you want, and they said I can have as much pasta as I wanted, as much tin ravioli as I wanted. Um, um, and yeah, they was, and one of the women there, I do her bins. I recognised one of the women, and when I walked in, this is how badly paid I am right now. And we have just had our pay rise. I think we got 7%, which sounds like a lot, really isn't. 73p, 73p an hour. That's what we got. 73p an hour, less than £1 an hour pay rise, and they screwed up our back pay as well. So yeah, but jokes aside, we got our pay rise eventually. It means I'm all right this month. Next month I should be okay as well, but it's not great. But yeah, they gave me lots of rice, lots of pasta, and lots of flavoured noodles. So and lots of cuppa soups. So I've got cuppa soups for winter, so I'm happy. Basically, yeah, they let me cherry pick what I wanted. So that was quite handy. But yeah, I'm not. I'm one of the guys on my round had to go to a food bank last month. I went the month before, so yeah, we've reached a point now. We've had staff leave. Um, we've reached a point. Yeah. But they let me cherry pick. I said I don't want to waste anything. I live and I explain my situation. I live by myself. Um, and I broke down and cried. So yes, it is what it is. And I'm working full time and I'm doing this. Now, if I was to earn money off this as well, that would top up my income. I wouldn't have to worry as much. Um, my brother's lactose intolerant. You can get special chocolate. Actually, you can actually get special chocolate for lactose intolerance. My brother's had it. It's disgusting. It is like craft chocolate, but you can white chocolate's better because it's actually got different. It's got but eat white chocolate. It's better than normal chocolate. It has different milk. It has powdered milk rather than whole milk in it. Um, and you can have no white chocolate. You can have and you can have gluten-free chocolate, which is also lactose-free. It is fucking unedible. How vegans don't die, well, they do. How you can be vegan? Like Forest Green Rovers, being vegan really helped them last season because they finished bottom in League One. How you can be vegan and actually be healthy is fucking beyond me because they have vegan sausage rolls, they have vegan burgers. Like, do you want the taste of meat without meat? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? Like, you're not getting enough of a balanced diet, and you're all really ill all the time. You look like you're emaciated. I've got colour in my cheeks. I've lost some weight. I've had a bit of a dodgy stomach the last couple of weeks. That is an after. I mean, yeah. Okay, so basically, the last 4 months, I have been struggling to feed myself, and yeah, it has led to me having some stomach complaints. I haven't been particularly well. I will admit that. I've collapsed at work a few times. I'll admit that. So I haven't been well. I've had this virus as well. So I've been a bit under the weather the last couple of months, which has been borne out in the content being a bit up and down. I have been very, very fatigued. It's been a horrible summer. My summer's been shit. I'm going to put it out there. I've been not very well this summer. And that's just me surviving on, bowls of porridge, toast, snacking, making my. I haven't had to do a full food shop since going to the food bank. Even then, I'm rationing my food. I've had 2 pizza takeaways in 3 months. Normally, it's once a month or once every couple of weeks. I'll have a takeaway. Twice, 3 months have I ordered pizza. I will be ordering. I might have no. Fuck it. I'm going to order pizza tonight because I've checked the bank and I can actually get by this month. I'm going to order pizza tonight. Yeah, but because I haven't been eating, I've had to make my food last. I've been rationing. I've actually caused myself a few health issues.